Welcome to the latest episode of Triple Takeover, a fortnightly podcast about Transformers and other vintage toy lines where three grown men ramble on about robots, lobsters, robot butlers, and doing the tidying up apparently. My name is Sixo, but more on that later because as ever, I'm joined by my two esteemed and devilishly handsome co-hosts. First up, there's the man whose sole purpose for getting up in the morning is the idea of a hard-nosed conehead. It's M.A.S.K from Transformers SquareOne.
Choo-choo.
Then we have the cheekiest, not to mention the chirpiest, Jurassic Park fan north of the M25. It's Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
Sounds like Sixo found a way to make that intro even funnier.
Very good. Together we are Triple Takeover, and the topic for today is none other than toy photography, which feels rather fitting given that it's the thing that the three of us are probably best known for in the Transformers community. This isn't really intended to be instructional in any way. Think of it less as how-to and more about why we do it to begin with, but I'm sure there'll be some of the technical stuff creeping in along the way. But before all of that, how's it hanging, chaps?
Yeah, it's all right. I'm just suffering from this weird sense of deja vu at the minute, but other than that, everything's great.
Well, that sounds terrible. How are you doing, Maz?
You want deja vu? I have a son. Is it Monday?
Wow.
Is it Wednesday? Is it 2021? I don't know. I don't sleep. Hey, everyone.
Fantastic news, mate. Congratulations.
Yeah. Massive
you.
Congratulations.
Many, many thanks.
Yeah, that's quite the update, that is.
He's been with us since the end of April, and it's just everything's just been about him, as you'd expect. He's our second one, but it's amazing how much you forget from the first time.
I can well imagine, mate. It's been a good few years since I've been in that position with a newborn, and I'm fairly confident I've forgotten it all already. I can say.
I think if we didn't forget it, you'd never do it again.
Yeah,
So
that's probably a good way. How's he doing? Is he getting bigger? Is he Titan class yet? Would you say?
he's rapidly approaching the size of a Fort Max, and it's all about, is my kid bigger than a Fort Max? That's when you know he's real. But no, he's growing. He's just under 5 kilos. I had him weigh today. He's drinking like a champ, pooping like a champ. He's brilliant. Love him.
Amazing stuff. And speaking of getting older, we've recently been described online as a group of older fellas. So I don't know how you both felt about that, but I feel dead personally. That's me written off.
Yes, please, no more on that later.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think we could put that one to bed. But it was a bit of a wake up call being described as an older fella. I can tell you.
Yeah, put it in a tub and roll it down a hill. No thanks.
I mean, being the youngest on here, you guys make me feel young, but even now I feel really old. So yeah,
youngest by how many months though, Liam? That's the question.
You are 1 year older than me, apparently, legally. Doesn't matter that we were born in the same year. It's just time is relative.
Well, I'm technically classed as a geriatric parent now.
I was going to say, Maz is the oldest of all of them. He's the real oldie.
That's why he's shouting at a cloud in the corner at the minute.
He's the real oldie here. So, yeah, well, obviously today's topic is toy photography, which seemed like it was going to be a fun one to me because, as I said, a lot of people know us for our photography. Oh, man.
Damn. You feel that strongly about photography, do you?
Oh, no. God, it's just not happening tonight.
It's the end times.
For some context right now, he's literally in the hallway, turning her head in different directions and barking at different windows. Hang on. Because I just wanted to say, a minute ago, how Maz said all of his time at the minute is taken up with having a new child and all that. But I think anyone who has looked at his Twitter feed might have noticed how much of his time has been spent rebuying Binaltech toys and things like that.
One toy. And I never owned it before.
How many have you got on the way?
You've bought so much Binaltech, Maz, it's crazy.
No, I mean, I've bought another Binaltech toy, but it's not here yet. Also,
Shocking.
Not one I didn't have. Sixo, how many Binaltechs have you bought since the last episode?
It's an undetermined amount at present.
I feel like it's important.
Numbers don't go that high.
Yeah, well, let's just leave it to the imagination, shall we? But I'm shocked that you've bought 2 of them. I think that's dreadful.
Self-enablement.
How many JRXs have you got now, Maz?
don't you start as well? Bloody
Have
hell.
you noticed how
It was
cocky
my
he's
birthday
been?
present to myself was AJRX. And possibly there might be a couple of individual
I was gonna
members
say,
on the way too.
You've been extraordinarily cocky this last couple of weeks, Soapbox. For
nothing,
someone that is going to get enabled on a future episode. Let's put it that way. That RID 2001 episode is going to come up at some point.
Has anyone got a landfill or a storm jet?
I know. What was that?
Who was that?
That was a brief
was
moment of
brilliant.
weakness. But I'm stronger than you guys. You guys,
A brief
talked
moment
yourself
of
into
weakness.
it.
Whatever, mate. That was having a little rum in the evening and then thinking, oh yeah, I'd like a landfill. That was.
No, it was talking to you two about landfill. That's all it.
It'll come again. We'll wear you down, honestly.
Well,
and then that episode is going to be priceless.
And just the absolute joy of that Binal Tech episode has been seeing you two just. Well, pretty much all of us really just fall down that well again, isn't it? Everyone.
Oh, well, I do. I always said I would get in on Binal Tech again one day. I always said it would happen, and then the episode was very much just the nudge that was needed. So.
Isn't that brilliant? Because everyone else has sort of responded, and they've dug out their Binal Tech collections, and people have started buying Binal Tech toys. We've had people tagging us saying this is Triple Takeover's fault. Dude going home with a brand new alternator or Binal Tech. It's fantastic.
It's been
everything
brilliant.
That toy line deserves to be.
It's been great. Even just people, as you said, digging out their old toys from however many years ago and just reappreciating them. It's just been amazing. I've absolutely loved seeing it. And actually, it's been great to see so many people, even just commenting on pictures that we've taken or whatever, and just saying, wow, that toy line was brilliant. A couple of people saying that it's ass or whatever, but... What can you can't please it? Yeah, exactly.
Well, they can comment on the entire toy line because you've basically bought, photographed it all in the last week. So
it's not quite true, mate. The best is yet to come, but we'll save that for another day, won't we?
It's been an absolute highlight this week. Is every time I look at my phone, it's Maz saying something and then Sixo replying with, "Oh, guess what I've got on the way? Bought another Binal Tech." It's just.
It's been a bit Binal Tech madness, fair to say, but it's so plentiful and so easy to collect and so delightful.
Was it's the last episode.
See, I'm getting in ahead of the any kind of enablement curve. That's the thing. So it seems to be making a bit of a splash. So we'll see how it is in a couple of weeks. But I'm delighted with it. Really, I'm so happy to rediscover that line. And, I make no bones about it. Yeah, it is. I self-enabled, but I couldn't be happier about it.
There's self-enablement and there's capitulation.
Buying an entire toy line. It's like several toy lines, technically.
Yeah. As I say, Soapbox, you just wait. You keep being cocky for now. Your day will come.
You've got nothing for me, Sixo. You got nothing.
But isn't it an amazing feeling to have a new Binal Tech on the way? It's that feeling from how many years ago now? It's like, I've actually got a new Binal Tech on the way. And then it arrives and it's that amazing box. This is not the Binal Tech Redux episode, but it has been amazing.
I was just going to say, should we just do another one on Binal Tech right now? We were going to talk about toy photography, but we can just talk about Binal Tech for 2 hours.
Of course, how much fun have you had photographing those Binal Tech years after the first time you photographed them, now with your updated equipment?
Amazing. And it's funny, actually, because when we did the Binal Tech episode, I look back and, kind of getting us on topic, I guess, I look back at some of the photographs that I had taken from the BTs that I had remained, from the time. And we're probably only talking maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe 6, that, the toys that I had in hand that I'd since sold and the photographs that I'd taken at the time. And I was really unimpressed with them. I was really like, oh man, these pictures are so bad. And I was looking for some for the episode artwork and whatever. So actually, it's been a thrill to retake new pictures of them now with, new setup, new equipment, all of that kind of jazz. And it's made such a big difference. And for me, I guess it's been nice because so much what I do is photos for reviews and all of that kind of jazz. It's been nice to just take some pictures just for fun as well, and just kind of really enjoy it. So it's kind of reaffirmed a lot of stuff for me, actually.
It's been really nice seeing those photos as well, just seeing those toys, because we'll cover this in the episode, but they really popped up at a different time for photography, didn't they? So it is nice to see those toys get that kind of modern photography treatment.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I've had tremendous fun with it. So, but yeah, I mean, it kind of bringing us, I suppose, naturally onto today's topic, which is toy photography. And I did think that this would be kind of fun to talk about, and we've already kind of ascertained why. But obviously, the three of us, as I've already said, are well known in different ways, I suppose, for our photography in the community, which I don't know, I guess is weird, and we'll kind of get into each of us in a minute and kind of how we got into it. But it is still kind of a weird thing to say, oh, like, I'm known for my photography. You know, it does sound a little bit poncy or whatever. But you know, we've each kind of come to it, I suppose, through our different routes, haven't we? I mean, Maz, you know, for you, you know, let's talk about it now. How did you get into it as the kind of person that's been sort of established on the scene longest? How did you get into toy photography? Because I know, and knowing you as I do, it wasn't necessarily, you know, what you set out to do, was it?
No, not at all. It was just an accompaniment to the articles, which is what I specifically wanted to do. I wanted to document toys and write about toys and express my enjoyment of them in written form. And nobody really likes a wall of text, so it made sense at the beginning for me to break up paragraphs with images of the toy I was writing about. But very little effort was going into making those images look impressive or even remotely photographic. It was just supposed to be an accompaniment, and that's what most of the photography in the fandom was like at the time, late 90s, early 2000s. There were no standout toy photographers. That it wasn't a known aspect of collecting. It was just people showing toys for what they were. You know, we've just discovered this toy. Here's a variant. Here's what it looks like when you get all these together. You know, these would have been photos even taken on film cameras or the very earliest phone cameras, or maybe someone had like a small digital camera. It was only about 2002, I think, that anyone I knew got a DSLR, and it was a guy called Ben Munn who was photographing his Diaclone collecting. And I saw what kind of extra benefit that was bringing to his work, the kind of the impact that it was giving his work. And I thought, well, I would love to do that too. So at some point I got an old Pentax Optio S40 or something, I think it was called, and I started doing photography with that. But that was still with a flash. That was with, you know, just bits of maybe a book, and you could even see my bed covers from where I used to live in the photographs, and the really bad 10-year-old wallpaper that was in my room. It was a long time before I started really focusing on making the photography look as good as it could, as a big element and a big draw of my work. But originally, the photography was never the draw of my work. It was the writing, which was the core.
Which is interesting, because I guess actually a lot of people now, you know, that maybe are kind of starting or trying to start out in the same way, probably put photography as almost, I wouldn't say more important than the words, but kind of certainly up there as a kind of dual part of what they do. And it's definitely become more prevalent now, hasn't it, in terms of the number of people that are trying to, even just casually take pictures of their collection and putting out really lovely images. Is everywhere now.
Yeah, I think that's got a lot to do with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram being key platforms where people share their hobby, whereas before it would have been websites or forums, and you know, words and long pieces of prose would have been par for the course. Whereas now, you know, it's a lot shorter. It's and you know, most of my effort now goes into photography, and I do most of my sharing on social media as opposed to my blog, which is woefully neglected these days.
I guess that's a really good point, is that, you know, obviously with social media, it encourages you to approach everything from a photographic angle. You know, typically posts, even on Twitter, that have photographs are often, you know, they're the ones that are kind of promoted and picked up and liked and all of that kind of stuff. So it really, probably that has had a huge influence in terms of how people approach the presentation of what they do. And I've noticed certainly even people sharing just pictures of their collection on shelves, there is a kind of presentation angle to it, which you don't see from websites that, if you look back at, you know, pictures from 20 years ago, that's just not there. And as you said, you would very often get people just very matter-of-factly, you know, with a simple camera at the time, you know, a little compact camera or whatever, taking pictures with lots of, I think the technical term is visual debris, you know, all the kind of bedspread and all of that kind of stuff. You would get a lot of that going on. Whereas now people are maybe a bit more considered about what they're putting out there as well. So it's definitely changed hugely, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has, yeah. There was a time where you could count Transformers photographers on one hand. You know, the people that were well known for doing it. It was like I said, Ben Munn, TF Kencon, Remy. You know, you could count the people on one hand who were responsible for that, and it was, they were looked at with awe because it was not an accessible standard for most people. people weren't buying expensive camera equipment. People didn't have phones that could produce those kind of results. Whereas it's quite different today. I think it's not as big a leap to producing attractive photo content of toys that you own as it probably was maybe 10-15 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think a big part of that is DSLRs, or do you think it's other things?
I think it's mobile photography becoming more common, because I think people who now have really good phones with great cameras, you can even work with settings like depth of field, aperture exposure, stuff like that. And you even do some post photography work on phones and the software they have. And maybe it's no longer too big of a gap to bridge to using a full-on DSLR with tons of settings and then using a software package from Photoshop or Lightroom or something like that to polish your photos afterwards.
Well, even then, we'll get into all of that later, but even stuff like Photoshop and Lightroom, there are tons of free equivalents as well now, and everything, or just simpler equivalents, and there are numerous apps and things that do a lot of that for you as well, and that's, people talk about filters and things like that, which is actually an area that I don't really know a lot about, to be honest, like adding Instagram filters and things like that. But a lot of that is done, I think, sort of almost automatically from what I understand. But there are numerous ways that people can achieve a style as well, I suppose, and kind of get to a result that they really want. Whereas you certainly, picking up a DSLR for the first time and not really knowing what you're doing with it, it's a very kind of complicated thing. So I can see that would almost be not a barrier for people, but it's certainly a bit of a kind of leap, it's a bit of a step change or whatever. So
it's a real thing. I mean, you're talking about people having a style and a signature. I remember back in the day, no one would put a watermark on their photographs unless they didn't want their photographs to be used on a fraudulent auction, or it was a particularly well-known website that had really rare toys and they wanted that recognition for that. Whereas nowadays, there are many more people producing Transformers photos that could qualify as being called artwork and creativity, and they have a brand, they have, a watermark, and the whole reviewing toys business is sort of worked to make that a bigger thing now.
Yes,
collectors
definitely.
with watermarks.
Yeah.
And also in terms of equipment, I know I was always happier, or I didn't feel like an imposter in the photography world when I was making the most of weak equipment. So I had like a compact camera or a mobile phone, and I was making photos that people were commenting positively on, but I always knew I'm just making the best of what I've got. I've got a method, and that's what I do. Whereas as soon as my wife bought me a DSLR a few years ago, the imposter syndrome was strong. And it was like, okay, now I have a standard to meet. There's people like Sixo, there's, all these photographers on TFW, like Tony Bacala, the guy who runs TFW, is also an incredible photographer.
His photos are exceptional. Yeah.
They're amazing. And these people use DSLRs, and now I've got to sort of somehow justify owning this and not look like a tryhard. And there was like a different pressure involved in making good photographs. And I remember my initial reaction was, no, I don't want this camera. This is too much. I can't make the best of this. Whereas I had a light tent and lights, but a compact camera, and I was super happy and had a method there. But the leap that my work took simply by having a DSLR was significant and easy to recognize.
I remember it at the time, but I think that the results speak for themselves as well. And I'm sure a lot of people would be surprised to hear you saying that, because your reputation with photography is very, very high, and rightly so. And but I can recognize it as well, because there's definitely been times where I've upgraded a little bit of kit or something, or changed how I do something. And almost you take a step back to take a step forward, don't you? It's almost like you have to kind of relearn it all.
It can be quite disheartening as well when someone gets a DSLR and then they think like, I'm not even able to take the photos I was taking with something half the price. And 100%. It can be a definite barrier to progression. You've got to get over that.
I think it comes with as well, you put in so much more effort, don't you, to learn how to use it. And it changes the way you take those photos, doesn't it? Like we were saying earlier, you go from sort of, like Pentax cameras and things where it's very much just snap, 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 or with your camera phone, you're just taking a functional photo. Whereas once you, with a DSLR, you put so much effort into actually taking the photo that it sort of expands into how you set up the photo and all the different things you use. And you then start to make it, give it life rather than it just being an image.
I think that's exactly it. I remember someone describing to me once the difference between DSLR photography and non-DSLR photography is that when you're not using a DSLR, the camera actually does so much of the work. Not does the work for you, but it fills in a lot of the blanks. It's like so much of it is automatic.
Yeah.
Whether it's the exposure or whether it's the focusing or whether it's the depth of field or different parts of it. Whereas actually there are elements in a DSLR that suddenly are under your control that you wouldn't even think of in automatic cameras or phone cameras or whatever it may be. Suddenly you're thinking about white balance, you're thinking about ISO, you're thinking about shutter speed, you're thinking about all of these different elements that actually you move one digit of one setting and it vastly changes the results that you get. But even then, you've got to learn all of that stuff to begin with as well. It's hugely daunting, hugely so. And I think I remember picking up a DSLR for the first time, not with Transformers. I already knew DSLR photography when I came to Transformers, but I remember being hugely disheartened by it to begin with, because it was like, even on automatic, it was like, well, why can I not get the results that I kind of want in my head, And I think there is a very big learning curve with it, for sure.
It's like I don't know. Mine was a similar sort of experience to your two. When I got mine, I was excited until I started trying to use it, and everything felt so counterintuitive, and it was so difficult. And no matter what I did, things looked worse, didn't they? Like than they did through the camera phone. And it was just, and like you were saying about imposter syndrome, I felt the same, but I felt even worse than that. I felt like I was missing something everybody else knew, because when someone else takes a photo, it looks easy until you do it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it looks effortless, but then when I was trying to do it myself, it's like, why am I too stupid to understand how this works? And
there's just so much of that. Yeah,
you feel stupid, don't you? You do feel like that, like there's some information that you just are missing.
And I think if you ask the wrong person how they take their photos and you don't know their history of photography, like why do they do it that way? What have they experienced and learned? For example, there's a guy in the UK who was doing a lot of toy photography, and he uses strobe lights. And if I was to try to reproduce what he was doing, the methods he was using, there seemed to be so many complicated aspects that I just, I knew I could never do that. And I just, at moments like that, you think, maybe this just isn't for me. I'd love to, but I probably can't. Whereas his method was so specific that I've realized now that I can do it a different way. I can do it my way. And a lot of what I've learned is trial and error, and it doesn't follow a methodical path. Like I find it very hard to explain to someone, but so it kind of depends who you ask as well.
It definitely does, and I think that, at the risk of saying it, and I'm not saying this about any Transformers photographers actually, but I am talking about photographers that I know who are not doing toy photography, but there because I do know people well as well that just are into photography, outside of this hobby. Bizarre.
You have other friends?
I know. Imagine that. I know people that I'm friends with people that don't even like Transformers. Imagine that.
But
some friend.
I know. Shocking, isn't it? But some people are a bit snobby about it as well, and they almost kind of they have knowledge of how they do things, but they like the enigma of it as well. They like
it's gatekeeping. It's simply gatekeeping.
Yeah. It's hugely gatekeeping.
And I really hate it when I see people say things like, just because you have a camera, it doesn't make you a photographer. I mean, that is designed to separate people and make them feel unworthy of pursuing something creative. And that doesn't help anyone apart from maybe making someone feel better about their own creations.
I 100% agree. I think anybody can do this. It's not stuff. It's all stuff that can be learned. Ultimately, yes, there is a creative aspect to it, and yes, some people will have more of an innate sense for, camera angles and things like that. But even then, it's stuff that can be learned. And I think what you said before, M.A.S., about trial and error, that is for me, the single biggest element that makes the difference, because I think sometimes people, and I suppose, being honest, I get asked a lot, how do you take this photo or that photo or whatever, and it's almost, I wouldn't say it's too much to explain in one paragraph. I'm not trying to sound arrogant with that, but there's too much history to how I got to that photograph, if that makes sense, because there's 1,000 photographs before that where I learned something with each one that brought me to taking this photo, actually quite simply. In some cases, you can just sort of point and click. But what came before that was all of the times I got it wrong. And those are the bits that people don't see, and the times that you don't share. And I think that's really important to acknowledge as well, is that nobody sits down and gets it right all of the time. People make so many mistakes. They might take 50 photos and publish one, and the one that you see looks amazing. The other 50 can look duff as anything. And that's just reality. We all have good days, bad days. So I think it's one of those where I suppose that would be a good message to try and get across a bit today, is that nobody should be feeling intimidated to kind of get going with this. Actually, quite the opposite. I think everybody can do this and should give it a go because it's fun.
If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's very much like that.
Well, I think you're downplaying yourself a lot.
You're being modest there, to say the least.
Oh no, I just don't generally have patience for these things, but with this I can do it, and I think that speaks to sort of, it is very daunting to pick up at first, but once you get going, you pick up so many little knacks and little tricks, and it becomes quite easy, doesn't it?
Well, that's the thing. I wanted to talk about one guy in particular, Boastful Manfish, John Strong. I don't think he uses DSLR photos, but I was like, I reckon, for example, both of you, if you were to take a mobile phone with a decent camera, I don't think you need all of the settings on the DSLR to take a striking photograph. And I reckon you could both apply what you know now of setting up a shot and general lighting and composition to take a really good photo. You can tell someone like John takes incredible photos because he understands composition, he understands focus, depth of field, character, and bringing something to life. And it's not just equipment. Like, he doesn't use a DSLR as far as I know, and he's able to take photographs that are incredible, really top draw photographs that would not be out of place in a catalog or on box photography and stock photos. And that's just someone who has an excellent eye for photos. So that is also a thing. For example, in the past, I've told people exactly what my settings are, and they have the same camera as me and the same lights and a light tent. And
I'm feeling called out here.
Oh, was it you?
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe you're not going to enjoy where the rest of this story is going. But no, I wasn't thinking of you, actually. Yeah. But and I told them exactly what I was using, and they were not able to produce the same results. And it's at that point you realize that there are a ton of things that you do before you even hit the shutter that come from experience of, okay, I want this result, so I have done this prior to taking the photograph even. Like, a lot of the work happens before you've even pointed the camera.
It's true.
And you don't even realize that you're doing stuff like that until, someone stops and says, wait, why did you just put that there? Why are you at this distance? Why are you using that for elevation? And, it's all stuff that comes with experience. And nothing that I've done in life has ever come from standing still. Every time I've taken a chance and tried something which I was inside, my anxiety is telling me, don't do it. You're not going to be good at it. You just don't do it. It's too hard. I've always taken a leap, and photography is like that too. I mean, a lot of times I've gone to Sixo and said, what would you recommend I do? And he actually put me on to using Lightroom, and it was a complicated and brand new piece of software that I was daunted by, but it has completely changed the way I take photos. So it's about taking a risk and trying something new. You have to try something new regularly. It's a muscle that you have to exercise.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think you're right. You're so right about all of the work that goes in before you even, press the shutter button or whatever button it is this, on your camera of choice. And I think that's really something that a lot of people, I think that's something that you learn to realize over time. I think that's something that maybe when people start out taking pictures of robots or whatever, they don't realize all of the choices that they are making almost by default. So if you are taking a picture with your bedspread in the background, that's a choice. That's a conscious choice to include that backdrop. Or you're making a choice to have a coffee table or outside, or you're going to buy loads of fancy dioramas or whatever it may be. All of this is a choice. So even if you're taking it with your laundry basket, that's a choice. But there's more to it than that. You're choosing lighting. You are, of course, choosing composition. You are, of course, choosing what you're putting in the photo as well, which toys it is, what you're, how you're setting it up, all of these things. And photography really is presentation. So as you sort of said, Maz, it's all going in there. But then there's all of the little things that you've learned from beforehand as well. As I said, all of the mistakes that you've made prior that are all informing how ultimately you want that photograph to look. And I think that's the thing that I would say was a big learning for me, was that actually you control all of these elements. Everything in the final photograph you have decided on. And actually, in a way, pressing the button that says take the photograph now is the final thing. It's almost like it's all there in the viewfinder. When you look through and you see it, you're like, yes, I'm good to go now. Click, and it's done. And I think that's possibly different to how people think about it at the start. So Liam, how did you get into the whole robot photography gig to begin with?
It actually started as a excuse to sort of justify why I was buying so many toy robots. That's kind of how it began. I just started because I was buying so many of them, and they were just, after a while, they were just sort of going on the shelf, and you kind of wanted to get more play value out of them, if that makes sense. And like when I was a kid, I was so fascinated by the catalogs and the photos you would see and how they were posed. And so when I was playing out with my toys, I'd go in like old granny's gardens who had little rock features and stuff, and I'd set them up and I'd make them look like the catalogs and stuff like that.
Wait, was this your nan or just other grannies?
No, my nan didn't have a garden. She spent all her money on toys for me.
So you would just find a random granny and use her garden?
That was it, yeah. Find a gran. That's what it was. It goes go gran hunting.
This could all be true for all I know.
Yeah.
I didn't just have one gran. I had a whole fleet of grans. That's why I got so many toys. But yeah, it sort of started as just kind of a desire to sort of recreate that kind of feeling. And it was just originally it was just on my phone and just for a laugh. And then I was sort of looking at Maz's photos, and that sort of started to then inspire me to do a little bit, put more effort in. And then started writing about them because it was a good excuse to sort of practice writing. That's really how it started.
And what would you say was the kind of moment then that you kind of took the leap, I suppose, into more kind of fully fledged photography? Because obviously, sort of start off or whatever. When did it kind of come to the point where you were like, yeah, I actually enjoy this. This is a thing I want to do more of?
Well, it was. I can't actually remember that because it was building, but I can actually remember the exact moment of where I was when things did change, and that was I was at Download and I was watching Ice-T and Body Count on stage performing, and then I got this text from no, that's what I was doing. I was getting very drunk. I was very my memory might not be so great because of how much booze I'd taken. But I got a text from Morgan asking if I'd take some photos of a toy, and then from there everything just changed. That was the moment where things just then started going upwards. It went just from being just a lark and a laugh, and then that's when I really started thinking I should put more effort into this. And that was
nice.
That was that moment.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, and look at you now. Do you know? You know what I mean? It's interesting to hear that you as well. Sort of, you haven't said it, but you're almost talking like you've got this not imposter syndrome. That I don't know. Is that you kind of talked about it in the same way that M.A.S. did almost? Is that fair or?
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. Like I always feel like my photos aren't real almost. Like when I put them online, I like look at them and I can see all the flaws and stuff, and I look at everyone else's and I think everyone else's just look perfect, and then look at my own and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, just waiting for that moment where you're found out and like, this person is gonna say, all right, so this is the method you're using to get these photographic results.
But that's it. Like I don't completely understand the camera that I'm using. I know what you mean. I don't understand completely Photoshop and Lightroom. Like I use them and I have a good working knowledge, but I feel like I was saying earlier, I feel like everybody else knows how to use everything on it, even though they don't. That's just how my brain operates. Is I think everybody else must know.
Nobody knows everything, but but I get that as well. Where there's a lot of photos that I look at that I'm not. I do sometimes obviously share photos that I'm not 100% happy with. Do you know what I mean? But there are. Maz, you and I have said it before that sometimes you just need to go with it. Don't you? Do you know what I mean? Like you can work on something, but then at some point you just need to know when it's time to press send. And there's
or not, or just abandon it,
or not. Yeah, exactly. But there are definitely times where I take photos that I look back on and I think, wow, could have done that one better. Or galleries sometimes, or whatever it may be, that you get to the end of it and you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's perfectly good. It's not how I necessarily wanted it to turn out, but it's good. It's fine. So yeah, we all get that, I'm sure.
There's a lot to be said about being inspired. I remember when I was doing a lot of photography for third-party reviews of third-party toys, they were so back-to-back at one point that I realized it was kind of falling into a pattern, and I would set up the photo shoots in the same way. And I wasn't really finding the results inspiring. I mean, sure, they were well lit and very clear. You could see the toy, and the poses were fun, and I was enjoying the toy. But I know when I'm inspired because it's the moment when you can't sleep, and it doesn't matter what else you had planned. You can't rest until you've produced the photo that's in your mind, and you might spend 2 to 3 hours setting up one photograph, but it needs to be what you imagined. The one I remember is doing Fans Hobby Grotesque, which was Fly Pro. I mean, I could not produce more than one photo a day for that gallery because I wanted to try something completely wacky for every single one. And it would just take ages to set up. Maybe it just wouldn't work out and I'd abandon it. But that felt inspired, and it was so much easier to produce photos under those circumstances. Even though the volume of output was much less, I was so much happier with the quality. As opposed to just me doing the same thing as a formula over and over again. So being inspired is a big thing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to be on a roll with it. There are days where I try and take photographs of something, and honestly, I try and listen to the little inner voice, that is trying to be honest with me, that says you're not enjoying this, or this is not happening.
Yeah.
And because I didn't used to do that, I used to try and push on regardless. And then what happens is you get to the end of the day or the end of the session, and you sit and look at the photographs and you think, these are not that great, and it's because you haven't listened to that little voice, I think. Whereas I think if it ever is an option, if it feels like it's not going the way that you want it to just abandon it and come back to it another time, I have found that to be quite beneficial as well. And sometimes I think it's just like, if there's other stuff going on, do you know what I mean? Or just frustration that, you can't get it looking the way you want it to. Sometimes for me, I find some toys very fiddly, and if you can't manipulate them in the exact way that you want them to, that's hugely irritating. And, that's something that you might want to walk away from, all of these things.
Yeah, when you've got it right, because you can't wait to get the memory card out of the camera into the computer and see it come up on your post-processing software. It's like, I can't wait to see how this turned out. That's when you've kind of you're in the zone at that point.
It's when your mind's already like 3 steps ahead and you're thinking of all the effects you put in, all the different things, elements and all that. You're already mentally preparing them.
It's not a chore at that stage. Editing is not a chore when you're not thinking like, oh, I've got 150 photo gallery to slog through.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
It goes easy. Yeah. But that kind of goes back to what we were saying before about a lot of this is in your mind's eye, isn't it? Because I do think, and this was another thing actually that I was taught before robot photography, someone said this to me, that actually the camera is just a tool. It's just there to produce with your input the image that you already see in your brain. So in that regard, it's a tool like a hammer. You when you put up a shelf, you know what the shelf is going to look like, but you don't kind of credit the hammer with putting it up, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in that regard, the camera is a bit like that. You already know what you want the photo to look like. All you've got to do is manipulate all of the different elements and take the photo in a way that it looks like what you want it to. And then, that's where the excitement comes from, because you're seeing that image that was in your brain finally kind of produced, on screen. So I totally recognize that. And I think what you said about, kind of ripping the SD card out the old camera, I've had that many, many times where I'm just like, I cannot wait to get this, and to share it as well, to get it, sometimes to just share it with other people and be like, look at what I produced. And then it gets like 3 likes.
I was just going to say that.
No one comments on it, and you're like, cool, I really like that one, but hey.
Yeah. Some of my favorite photographs down the years have, I think maybe I'm one of 2 or 3 people who appreciated them, and I'm still happy with them, but that's just, that's down to taste and like what you see in your mind, your creative processes and your influences that dictate what you think makes a robot look good in what surroundings, what angles. Maybe there's a reference that nobody got, so yeah, that can happen. That's a regular one.
100%. I'm still to this day amazed by some of the photos that do well of mine online versus some of the ones that I actually really like that people just kind of overlook. And I'm like, oh, okay, I wonder what it was then. But I think that's really interesting as well. That's not something that I'd really thought to talk about much today, but I find it fascinating which photos do well sometimes. And I think a lot of the time it is just about the toy as opposed to the photo.
Yeah, toy definitely does a lot of the work. I mean, that's why 20 years ago, when I was doing article photography and I would take a photo of a toy, people would say that's an amazing photograph. It wasn't an amazing photograph. It was maybe just that the toy took up most of the frame and it was a really nice looking toy, and their focus is drawn to that toy, and maybe they'd never seen it in focus before without any visual debris around the outside. So the actual resolution of the image isn't crazy high. There's no beautiful shadows or lighting or mood or atmosphere, but they're looking at that toy. Toy is something they desire, and they think, oh, it's an amazing photo. I've saved that. It's my desktop background now. And it's the item doing 99% of the work.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that.
You definitely see that as well in the way we consume the media now as well. Like we're saying through Twitter and Instagram, it is a lot of people just scrolling up really fast, isn't it? So all they see is that toy. Because I always notice it's always, if I had to put a picture of something I've just taken for eBay on Instagram or Twitter, it gets more likes than the ones you've composed. And it's because people aren't, I don't think they're always looking at the full shot that you've composed and all the different elements. They are, like you said, there's a toy in the middle of a frame and they see that, and that's why they're clicking the button.
Definitely. The bit that makes me laugh it happened recently actually with a couple of Binaltech pictures. I posted a picture of 2 Binaltech toys that I'd got in. It was RC and Laserwave, just in the box, just on my stairs. Just took a quick phone camera snap of them in the box, and I don't know what numbers it did. I can't remember, but it was enough that I went, whoa, okay, a lot of people really like that. And then I spent considerable time setting up a photo shoot, took some nice pictures of them, edited it, all of that, added watermarks, put them online, and they didn't do as much numbers as the box photo. And that's just the way it rolls sometimes, but it is hilarious. It's still an element of it that I find kind of fascinating.
Box photos always go down really well.
Oh yeah.
On Instagram.
Oh yeah.
Because ultimately, like Twitter and Facebook are not designed to be photograph appreciation platforms, are they? It's not like Flickr was set up to be. So you will still get people who use Twitter and Facebook as just, really quickly digestible, consumable platform of media that people have shared. And they won't pay that close attention to the kind of thing you've put together. How many people are they following? How many minutes do they have to look through their feed? Are they going to notice that incredibly awesome reference you put in the background of a picture, or the lighting you use to recreate a scene? If it's not immediately recognizable, then yeah, that could fall on deaf eyes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good one. I think I agree with you. I think it's also about how stuff presents in thumbnails and all of that kind of stuff, and how immediately kind of eye-catching it is, and there's a lot of that. And as you said, Liam, box photography always does well. It just seems to be something that people really like, which is weird because it's something that for me is just like the quickest and easiest thing to do. That's just literally a box on a staircase and slap a photo up, But
you compose the photo, don't you? You make sure that the box is not a dodgy angle. There's not a reflection in the plastic window that doesn't let you see the contents. Your cat's tail isn't in the photo, or if it is, you make a thing of it. And it's still like there's a thought process behind that quote unquote quick and dirty picture.
Always. And I guess that comes back to what we were saying before, was that there is all of the learning from previous photos still with something like that. Yes, it's a quick 2-minute or not 2-second photo that I'm just taking of a new item on the stairs, but there's still all of the learning of like, okay, so where on the stairs actually looks best, where's the best light and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's still a learning there, and there's still a thought process, and there's still a consideration. It's just not all of the kind of I suppose intensive work that maybe goes into a more sort of studio style thing, which is really interesting. But I think sometimes people don't even realize that some of us do photographs on phones and things as well. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's obvious when I do phone camera photography.
Do you think?
But I think maybe that's because I've painted myself into such a formulaic corner with what my studio photographs look like.
Because of the background.
It's just obvious. But you know what? Just on the subject of box photography, one thing I've learned is to appreciate photographers who can take a photo of a toy's box and have it be completely straight. Every time I think I've got it, I look at the photo and go, oh, it's angled this way. Oh, no, I've got to rotate the image now. Oh, no, that bit's like the perspective's wrong. It's really hard, to the point where I just angle them deliberately now. so as to not fail at doing it straight.
I tend to angle them for that reason, because yes, it is very hard to get them straight on.
And I've got to say, UNEM Studios is an expert at getting them straight.
Is he really?
Yeah,
he's excellent photographer anyway.
But he's really, really good at getting those the G1 boxes or third party, whatever it is. Just it looks like a proper stock photo in terms of how straight it is in the frame.
I was going to ask later on, actually, if there were any particular photographers in the community that you guys really admired. But UNEM, for one, Unicron Nemesis for me is one that I really enjoy his photos a lot. I find the way that he lights them, and he's very consistent with his black backgrounds. But the way that he lights them and the way that he presents the toys, I think is it's very kind of, obviously it's a particular style, but it's just, I don't know, there's something incredibly eye-catching about them. And I found he has a way of presenting the toys in full frame within the confines of what, within the dimensions of the photograph itself, such that you see everything. You see all of the various features, like if it's robot mode or alternate mode or whatever it is. He just has a nice way of displaying them such that you really feel like you can appreciate the toy just in this one image.
Yep, agreed. So what about you, Sixo? How did you get into toy photography?
Well, it was sort of by accident. I mean, I had done some DSLR photography beforehand. I'd done a course, actually, a photography course my wife bought for me for birthday present, and that was years ago now. But really loved it, and I had wanted to get into it. Had sort of dabbled, on holidays and things like that, with wanting to get into photography. My stepfather does a lot of photography. He's actually now he's retired from work. And does, actually now make, I wouldn't say amazing money, but, he's got a bit of a sideline, doing nature photography. He takes photos of birds and insects and all kinds of stuff. And his photos are insanely good, has to be said. Insanely good for that arena. It's incredible. So I always had an interest in it and a passion for it. And then I think it was 2014, I shared the first toy image. And I even remember what it was. And it was just a camera phone image. And it was Feral Rex, MMC, Feral Rex. And
that was the first photo you shared?
Yep.
Even before, like, Masterpiece toys?
Yeah, I'd never shared any. Well, other than, maybe like what a non-considered photo. That was the first one where I was like, okay, I'm going to, really make an effort with this. And I'd just never really done it before. Just never really kind of fussed with it. And shared a picture on TFW 2005 and got some nice feedback. Started sharing more pictures, and then shared a lot of masterpiece pictures. I remember sharing pictures of like MP11 and things like that. And even before that, actually, like MP6 Skywarp, and I remember then kind of sharing more and more.
Wasn't Scoria one of your earliest ones?
I got a couple of third-party bits, Scoria, Quakewave.
I remember your Scoria images.
Yeah.
I definitely remember some of your Dinobot pictures.
Yeah. And well, then it just kind of went from there. And initially they were just kind of around the house. And then, the carpet kind of became a thing, like shared of it. That was a whole interesting time. So just sharing, just taking pictures literally on my stairs. But then I started experimenting with using, better lights and things like that. Because initially I had, if it was during the day, I had a lot of light in that part of the house. There's like a big skylight at the top. So, it's actually very decent for photography. And actually, I do say to people now, when they're talking about buying lots of expensive lighting and things, I do say to people, do you have big windows or
natural light
to natural light?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just, if you do, maybe get going with that first and see how you go, But yeah, just got cracking with that really. And lots of people were very kind and left me nice comments, and I thought, this is kind of fun and I'm really enjoying this, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I think the first kind of gig I got, if you like, was Kapow Toys actually saying to me, do you want to take some pictures of Masterpiece tracks? And I was had already done some reviews and bits of my own before that, but that was the first kind of one where I was like, yes, I absolutely would. If you'd like to do that, that sounds good. And did a gallery of that, and it just kind of went from there, really. It sort of snowballed very quickly. But I've evolved, obviously, my setup considerably since then, and don't tend to do photos around the house so much anymore. A lot of people were sad to see the carpet days go, but it had to happen. But yeah, I absolutely love it. absolutely love doing it. I get a great thrill from doing it even now.
I like this, the origin story of Sixo.
You mentioned a couple of things there, actually, which struck a chord with me. First of all, the being inspired by a family member. It actually made me remember that my brother is very much into photography. And I have a couple of canvases around the house that both my wife and I fell in love with that we got made from his photos that he took
Nice.
outdoors. And there's like a beautiful photo of the inside of a really old tube train that we have up in our kitchen, which is lovely because that reminds me of London at a time when I can't get to London. And he had a beautiful photo that he took on Myrtle Beach in the US. So his photography always, it was nice to have someone like him to sort of bounce off, like, what do you think of this photo? And so he was actually an influence now that I think about it. And also the whole thing about natural light is enormous as well. Nearly half the photos I took of all of my Diaclone toys when I wrote articles for TF1 were taken in an apartment which had a massive window. And all I used to do was close the blind to not totally flood the picture. But I just had a background, and the natural light from the window did all the work in those photographs. And it was only when I got a light tent that I started to not use the big window anymore. And obviously not every apartment that we live in has had that kind of natural light.
It's quite amazing the difference, though, isn't it? Moving from natural light to lighting at first when you've got your first bulbs and stuff. I remember, again, like you're saying about the cameras, almost being disappointed at first because natural light was so good, and it made things so easy. But once you get control over it yourself, it's actually quite difficult to get into, isn't it? And it's still one of the things I still struggle with now most is lighting.
When I set up the light tent sometimes, when I was doing it in the living room, if it's in the daytime, and there are periods of the year in Iceland where it's just daylight, and the natural light would come in, and I would just take photos with my lamps as well, and the difference it made to have natural light in there as well was quite amazing. And I just actually posted a couple of photos the other day of J5 rail spike from Car Robots, or Robots in Disguise, and there was one photo which I took with the lamps and the normal setup, and there was another photo I took which had completely just been done with the ambient light in the room, and I just turned on the light on his gun, and the colors in the background, I'm not even sure I could replicate it. They just looked really beautiful gradient of, it almost looked synth wavy. It was just I was so happy with it. I just felt like I had to post it, even though the focus maybe wasn't as crisp as the studio photo with the lights. But natural light is just magic.
Yeah, it's really something, and it does, as you said, it just brings out the colors and loads of stuff in just a way that is unimaginable. And I think that was a big element of my photography early on. Was that natural light, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, the colors and things like that," but it was just that ultimately. The one real downfall of natural light is that it's so inconsistent. So you can, from 1 hour to the next or whatever, it can completely change. So if you're doing a full photo gallery, or you're aiming to get shots that look fairly consistent in whatever way, you just can't bank on it. And equally, there's a lot of times where, particularly in those days where I was doing a lot of natural light photography, where you would think, okay, I'm going to take some pictures now, and you get set up and the light would just go, and it would suddenly go really dark or whatever, and you just think, okay, well, that's over then. And it's annoying, but that was pre-children though, so the time wasn't quite so precious, to be fair. Right. It was kind of like you can come back to it a little bit later or whatever, whereas now that would be like a disaster, because if that time goes, it's like, okay, something else is going on in the house or whatever. But yeah, hugely inconsistent with natural light, but still, it's the results when it all aligns and the heavens decide that the light is going to be perfect for you. It's incredible.
Yeah, some of my favorite photos of my own are the ones I took outside when conditions just conspired to be beautiful for a particular toy. Those are definitely my favorites, and that actually makes me feel like a photographer. Not the stuff I do indoors that just feels like me taking photos of toys, but when I've taken photos of Fans Hobby Overlord or Diaclone Big Powered, and they were outdoors amongst some, maybe some grass or some snow, and it didn't just look like I'd plonked a toy in the snow. I really enjoyed that, and it made me feel like this is what I would like to move to next, if it was possible, time-wise and condition-wise. That would be, and I've always kind of harbored a fantasy of going out into the lava here and and taking photos amongst lava and what Iceland has to offer. I'd love to if it was possible.
I saw your Fans Hobby Overlord snow picture, or one of them, the other day, actually, somewhere. I can't remember how I came across it, but I saw it, and I remember thinking, wow, that's a really nice image. Really,
I appreciate that.
Really
Thank
good
you very
photo.
much. I loved it.
No,
really enjoyed doing it.
Definitely.
They've got I think it's hundreds of different types of snow in Iceland. They've got a name for all the different types of snow. And it was that particular snow that day, when you really focused and got up close, it was crystalline. And
I was just going to say,
amazing. That wasn't added in post. That's what it looked like.
Crystalline was the word I was going to use. It almost looks not real. It's interesting. But I also know how DSLRs can make things look not real as well. Sometimes you take a picture of something, load it up, and you're like, wow, that's got a really weird quality to it.
Would you say metallic?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe a filter.
Yeah. Well, that's the secret. That is the secret.
You just have
one button.
Yeah. You got to pay for it. It's a special plugin you get to Photoshop and all photo programs, actually. And it's just called Metallic Filter. You just press one button and it completely transforms your image.
It does.
Makes your toys look shiny.
It can make a very, very bad photo suddenly look exactly like you want it to. Does all the work for you. It's incredible.
It can take someone with no photographic talent and elevate their photos to a level of review standard.
Yeah, that was such a funny old business. I guess for the benefit of people that are not clued into the whole metallic filter saga, I don't know what you'd call it really, but the whole thing, it kind of snowballed, didn't it, from a silly thing online. So some people, I think, questioning what had gone into making. It was my photos, wasn't it? It was some
originally,
of mine.
yes.
Yeah. It was some of mine initially.
To the point where when I got it leveled at me, I actually felt like it was a compliment. I was like, I've reached that point now. People think I'm using a metallic filter. Yes,
it was hilarious, and it kind of I think it started with it was a third-party toy, and I think I got accused of manipulating the color on it. And someone,
it was the red, wasn't it? It made it look a really cherry red.
Yeah,
I think
red. I don't think it was actually. I think the particular photo, I think it was a 6-shot, and I think it was the green. And someone said, you've made it look blue instead of green, or green instead of blue, or something. I can't remember. But the I remember saying back, it's the lighting, and they questioned that, and they didn't agree with that, and thought that was a silly thing, and that I was lying, or I don't know what they thought. But there was a lot of weird accusations going around at that time, and then this whole thing of metallic filter came up, that you're using a filter to make them look metallic.
Don't trust that person's photographs. That's not the way the toy looks.
There was a lot of that, and it was interesting because it was like, well, I've never set out to make photos that are like hyper realistic. Do you know what I mean? That like look exactly like the toy looks. That's never been the aim, because the very nature of DSLR photography is that they're going to look a bit stylized and whatever. You're playing with focus, you're playing with lots of elements, and the way that the light is captured has a huge difference as well. Also, white balance, which makes all the difference in terms of the colors and how they're captured. I mean, I typically do set the white balance for most, not for every individual photo, but certainly for different setups. I have a setup of like a road setup, which, because it's got a kind of greenish tint to it, it tends to kind of capture, it tends to reflect onto the toys and things like that. And so I have to change the white balance for that, because otherwise it all just looks very green. Mm-hmm. And by the logic of, the example that we're talking about, maybe you would think that I'd made the toys look green, so I have to kind of correct that. But I do that in camera, interestingly, not in post. But, you can do it in post as well. But that's, it was just funny because it was trying to explain, actually, no, there's nothing, there's no underhand, weird, nefarious aim here. It's just, the toys look different under different styles of photography. And I think I shared a picture of under a phone camera, and they were like, it's a different color. And I'm like, well, yeah, the lighting is different as well, and it's, I don't know. It was a long time ago, but from that, metallic filter was born, and I think a lot of people sort of assumed that we were using this.
I don't know.
One-stop
what
shop
I
or
was
something. I don't know.
Insulted by more. Was it the fact that it was, you are it was an accusation that you're actually trying to achieve some kind of agenda by making it look unlike it really is, and therefore that's a bad thing because you're not an honest person. And I suppose that was amplified when these were review photographs, where I was just trying to say, no, that's what the toy looks like to me. And you're seeing a very big contrast between the darkest and the lightest areas, possibly because I'm not that good of a photographer that I can't change that. Or it was the accusation that it was one click that made your photos look good. It's like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, it was weird. I've had that a couple of times over the years where people question the motives behind, me doing these photos. It's not the only time
toys.
Yeah, exactly. Which is always a weird one to me because I'm like, you know what? I'm just some dude that is trying to take nice pictures of toys. There's nothing, there's nothing underhand about it. There's no secret agenda. Put the tinfoil hats down because it's like, I don't know what you think is going on here. And I've had people accuse me of being, I don't know, showered in riches from third-party companies and things like that. And it's like that is not. Do you know what I mean? Just imagine it, really.
I just can't wait for the third-party episode when we talk about the whole.
That's a whole other topic.
I'm looking forward to that.
When if people realize how unglamorous that is in reality, it's just But I mean, that's a whole other thing. But it's funny, I guess. I guess I can understand it. You see glossy photos of toys or whatever, and maybe you think, hey, my toy in hand doesn't look like that. Why is that?
Yeah. That's another thing, isn't it? That whole how many times have you received a comment where the thing is, like, when I take a photograph of a toy, I know in my head how I want it to look, and that's probably influenced by a bunch of cartoons I've watched, comics I've read, and art I like. And I think when people draw robots from a particular angle that makes their waist look like it's thrust forward, or their shoulders are wider, or their head is in perspective, or they've really, there's a shadow on this part of it, and I think that looks really cool, I'm going to try and recreate that. And if I manage to succeed in recreating what's in my head, people may sometimes say, I've got that toy and I'm holding it in my hand and it doesn't look as good as in your photograph. But it's not necessarily always an accusation that something underhand has taken place. I can see that the lighting is normal, the toy is the right color, and it is the same toy that they've got. And I've not added a filter to it or After Effects or anything like that. And they're just like, it's almost like by holding the toy in your hand, do you not sometimes do that with a robot you've got in your hand? You just sort of hold it up at an angle and you look at it from below and you think, if this robot was real, this is how cool it would look. And I remember photography of third-party products. It wasn't until I saw the fans project Insecticons and they had their legs fanned out in a really realistic fashion that suddenly I was like, whoa, is that what third parties can do? They can make toys that look like that. But it was just the fact that the photographer had posed the toy in a way that sort of clicked with me. Is like, that's how cool robots should look. And it's definitely being done on a transformer. Wow, it's like when you see those Studio Ox artwork of Transformers, and it's so high class and it's so different to what the cartoons look like. They weren't always the best presentation, but then you'd see serious art take. That's why Call of the Primitives is sometimes such a cool episode for people, because the art style was so different to everything else, and you think, okay, that's how good Transformers can look. So that's the whole thing about people saying, oh, my toy doesn't look the way you've presented it in a photograph. But it's a bad thing.
Photography is it's not at all. But photography is hugely what's the word I'm looking for? It makes a major difference in terms of how things are presented. But all of it is a choice. Is exactly what we were saying before. Every little bit that you change in terms of how you photograph a toy, and not just DSLR fancy photography, but even like just phone photography, whatever. It all makes a difference. I mean, the best example I can give currently is those Kingdom Galvatron leaks that have come out, because everybody was losing their minds over the proportions of that toy, because they thought at one stage that it looked, like hugely big body, tiny little legs, and massive head. And that was kind of the first picture that came out. And everybody was like, oh my God, it looks terrible. And then a couple of people were like, hang on, I think it's actually just the photography. It's that someone's taken it from a slightly wide angle, from a top angle as well. So you're seeing everything kind of curved out, but because it's taken from top down, it's really accentuating the head and making it's distorting and making the legs look smaller. But then there was another photo released, which was kind of the reverse. It's taken from a downward angle, but again with that kind of slightly fisheye wide angle thing going on, and it made the legs look huge and the upper body was much smaller. And people were going, okay, this is the real proportions of the toy now. So the photograph that you saw before was wrong, and this is, and I saw it, people going, this is what the actual toy looks like, and doing comparisons of the two. But then actually it turned out that neither of them were really representative, that it was somewhere in between. And for me, it was a great example of whether that was done by design, whoever had that toy, through whatever means in hand, whether it was by design that they put out photos to kind of perplex people or whatever they were doing, or it was just simply that they had a default setting that happened to be a little bit wide angle on their camera, and they just took a couple of pictures and the result was not intended. It just showed that actually how you photograph these things makes all the difference. And saying, I think it doesn't look like it does in hand, it's never really going to, unless you just take a straight on picture at what I would call a neutral millimeter on your camera, not wide angle, not zoomed in, but that you just kind of get it absolutely, is considered to be like neutral for your eye. That really, you'd have to consciously shoot it in that way to have it look like it does in hand. Anything outside of that, it's going to look different. But even then, the colors, take it in sunlight versus taking it indoors. People do that all the time, and of course it's not going to be the same color because the quality of the light is going to make a difference as well.
And the way you pose it.
Yeah, and the way you pose it, of course.
Because there is a way that you can pose toys that kind of brings them to life, and they look more realistic. Proportions are better. I mean, I've seen so many photographs where people have posed masterpiece toys, but they don't even remember to flatten the feet against the surface or on which the toy is standing, so it immediately breaks your immersion.
Yeah,
and that's just a very, very easy thing to do. Like you were talking about this head-on image at a neutral distance. Well, just if you separate the legs a little bit, point the toes out, make sure it's flat on the surface, the arms are in a natural position, the head is focused, well, the robot looks cool. Some people probably maybe don't even have the ability to physically manipulate the toy in their hands to pose that naturally. And I've seen it in the photographs that people take, which they share online about, like, I just got this toy, and it's not always representative of how good a toy can look. And maybe that's why sometimes there's a discrepancy between what people think you're doing and what they've got in their own hands.
Maybe so. I think all of that stuff comes with practice, though, doesn't it? And it's once you kind of make a conscious choice of like, okay, I'm going to do toy photography, and take some pictures, you start to pick up a lot of that stuff fairly quickly, I think. And it's kind of trial and error, isn't it, of what works, what doesn't work, and kind of the feedback that you get and everything as well. I think ankle tilts and stuff is a really interesting one now, because I can't abide sometimes taking pictures of toys without ankle tilts and things like that. You know what you were saying about flat-footed and all of that. I find it really difficult now, but it's still a thing sometimes. But yeah, I think it is interesting how different those toys can look depending on what people do with them and what choices they make behind the camera of how they're going to present them.
Do you remember that phase Hasbro went through where they started molding all of the feet at an angle so that they were posed to look more natural, weren't they? Rather than giving them ankle tilts and all of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the first toy line I bought
Well, I remember
was.
Combiner Wars would have been that, wouldn't it?
Were some animated toys like that as well? TF animated. I think they were. I think that's the first time I experienced it myself, was with some animated toys. Yeah, the deluxe version of the Optimus Prime, the Cybertronian Optimus Prime, has the angled feet.
Maybe that's where they first turned up. I remember them being quite prevalent in Combiner Wars. All of the limbs have the feet like that.
Prowler's one I especially remember from Combiner Wars, like, really stood out.
I
remember really disliking that. I think I really disliked that originally. I was like, no, allow me the opportunity to do that. But then obviously...
Let me ruin it for myself.
Right.
I've not really come across that. It sounds so weird.
Well, another toy that has it is Robots in Disguise Warrior Class Bisque. I'm looking at him right now. I just want to shout out to... Yeah, I've got to shout out to Anonymous Human, who sent me this for free. he gifted me a Warrior Class bisque, which is not a simple toy to find these days. So I'm greatly appreciative. Thank you so much. And this has flip out feet, which are molded at an angle. So pretty much there's only a very small window of posability that you can use where the feet look natural. If you go too wide, obviously they're not completely flat against the surface. And if you try and do G1 legs completely straight, they're obviously not angled right for that kind of posing. So yeah, that's definitely a thing. The whole angle cut on feet in robots.
Yeah, it was very, very prevalent in Combiner Wars. I just remember every single deluxe is essentially the same, aren't they? But they've all got them same angled feet.
I wonder what was happening there for a minute. I wonder if that was suddenly like a little sponsor section or something that you were doing, that you were going to talk about bisque, and that it was going to be like, and now a word from our sponsor, lobsters.
Yeah.
I was sort of like sitting there in mild curiosity of what was going on.
I just wanted to say thanks because it's a big deal when someone sends you a toy for free. It's it's an amazing thing that people would just do that, isn't it?
That's incredible. Very generous.
Yeah.
Transformers aren't cheap. It's not a cheap hobby, and you can really make a difference to someone just by sending them a toy. I do actually. This is unrelated, but I remember a good friend of mine in the hobby once. Some home truths. I'd been in the hobby for a little while, and I'd gotten into collecting quite expensive stuff, and he just said, "Do you remember back when you first joined? Like, we would just send each other stuff for free." I was like, "Hey, this is a really cool toy I picked up. I really think you should have it." How long has it been since you've actually done that? Since? And he wasn't trying to cast shade on me for not being generous, but it was a thing that, like, you can lose sight that this is a hobby where people interact with each other, and you share this space with people, and it's supposed to be enjoyable, and it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that we all do this for fun, and it's not just about accumulation really of things. So, sorry, a bit sidetracked there, but I wanted to say thank you for bisque. Big deal.
I think actually it's not that far off topic, because if anything, it kind of plays into the whole photography thing as well, because there is an element of, so what we said earlier, isn't it? You could be really standoffish about it, and when people ask questions or whatever it is, just kind of not want to answer them. But I feel like all three of us are very happy to do that. I mean, certainly we've talked about it in the past and said about some of the kind of questions that people do ask, kind of common questions and things like that. I mean, the number of times I've been asked, what equipment you use, stuff like that. And that's, I guess in some ways, that's partly why we talked about doing this episode as well, was because it just felt like a kind of nice point to kind of address some of that. And I think when you have something that, if whatever it is that people seem to kind of respond to within the community, it's nice to talk about it and share information and things like that.
I've had people in the past send me toys from their own collection, really rare stuff. Best example I can remember is a Microchange Blue Bumblebee, which is a multi-$1,000 toy these days. He just sent it to me and said, it would probably help your article if you had photos of this. And that has happened, and that's been amazing. And then
wow,
one dude a couple of years ago, a really good friend, he sent me a sealed G1 Transform, and he said, "You're not going to pay for that. I just want to see your photos, and I want you to have that because you'll do it justice." And for someone who suffers imposter syndrome, to receive a gift like that is quite like, this is too much almost. It took me almost a year to take that toy out of the shipping box and actually do photos of it. So
I'm clearly doing something wrong here, because people are not sending me all of these free toys. You're like you're drowning him over there, mate. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm drowning in something.
Snow.
Yeah. I can only imagine at the moment I was going to say with the new
McDonald's
baby,
changeables, mini spice. What is it this week?
Take your pick.
JRX trains.
I'm laughing, but it's true.
Right, well, one other thing I wanted to ask about today was how you felt your photography, your toy photography, has evolved over the years. And from whatever it may be behind the scenes, that people might not perceive, or just kind of the stylistic choices that you've made. Liam, how about you?
Oh, man, it's changed dramatically. Like, when I look back at some of my earlier pictures, I cringe. I don't know if either of you get that. Like,
Yes.
Yeah. But like the difference then, and it's weird how you don't see it at the time in the same way as you do years later. And it's just like, when I started out, it was so much of it was just to have a grown-up excuse to play with toys. And as I've got older and I take photos with a DSLR and all this stuff now, and compose the shots. It's just everything I do is completely different, but in some ways it's still based around the same idea, if that makes sense, because it's still just an excuse to get more time with these toys. Because when you were a kid and you got a toy, you played with it, didn't you, for ages and what have you. As a grown-up, you don't. You open it, you transform it a few times, probably chuck it on some shelf to get dust on or whatever. And so, yeah, taking photos is just a great way to make these things last days, weeks and stuff. And, and so through that, I've developed so many different photography skills. Even though I do feel like an imposter, I've learned so much, and it's transformed. Ha ha ha. How I take photos. So yeah, I just think it's changed massively.
I think it's interesting actually, because I think sometimes, when you get to know someone else's photography really well, and you see it daily, for over years and years and whatever. This is probably true with both of you actually, at separate times. But then it's not until you look back at a photo that person took, let's say 5 years prior or whatever, that you suddenly realized how much they have evolved. You just, in my head, Liam, like, your photos have always looked as good as they do now. Not that they ever looked bad. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that, clearly there has been an evolution with all of us. But like I think I recently, for doing some episode artwork or something, we were looking for some of your pictures, and I came across some of your older ones, and I was really like stunned actually, just how different they do look. Do you know what I mean? Even just from a few years back or whatever. And I think you're clearly, like, your trajectory or whatever for how you kind of approached it all is quite incredible. Well, again, that's not me saying what you've done. I've got to be kind of trying to word it in the right way, because that's not me at all saying what you ever did was bad. But it's just, I think it's important to acknowledge that we're all of us, aren't we, on a learning curve? Whether you've been doing it 6 months or 6 years, you still kind of learn something new every day. And Maz, you can see the same with yours as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. Comparing photos to older photos and seeing the standard it's a funny thing to say, but I think, like, with your photos, Sixo, they started off at an extremely high standard already. And I think it's a standard that very many people in the hobby would love to have achieved. And that's your starting standard from years ago, on the carpet with natural light, simply because the photos were so incredibly striking. Now, whether you look at that and see technical details that you're unhappy with and ways you can polish it is entirely how you work as an artist. But to look at photos from, like, even myself or Liam or lots of other people, and to see that their photos now are as good as that or better, and than the starting position of an already very talented photographer, shows you how far people have come. And that's really an amazing thing to see as well. I don't really think, I don't know if it's true for you guys, but I don't think you could even be doing this today if you hadn't noticed an improvement in your work. The motivation wouldn't be there. It's just the fact that you have to be honest and say that you're looking at your own photos and you're recognizing that your own work has improved massively, which is what inspires you to continue and try new things. And that improvement gives you confidence to try something kind of outrageous, maybe, like whether it's using these really cool backgrounds or dioramas or investing in cool things to put in your photographs because you believe you can make it work now because you've come such a long way.
Yeah, I think that's hugely true. And I definitely look back at a lot of my older stuff, actually early robot stuff, and I cringe to high heaven. Honestly, there are photos that I just would not share now because I can just see things that I did wrong at the time, or some of it is circumstantial. I can look at it and think, okay, I didn't have the lighting then, or I didn't have this, or technical aspects that would have made it easier. But there's a lot that is just mistakes that I made as well, So it's very kind what you're saying, Maz. But equally, I do cringe about a lot of that early photography. Just by sort of, I suppose, looking back at it, really. I tend not to a lot. And I guess it's interesting because in some ways, and I know this is probably true of all of us, you kind of build up this library of photos, don't you, that from over the years. But actually, the reality is that you only ever want to post the sort of newer ones because you look back at a lot of the older ones and think, well, it's not as good as I could do now. I could do better. And I find that I'm forever
it's not good
sort
to
of almost
remember.
Yeah. I find that I'm sort of like forever almost not like retaking the same shots, but I'm forever doing new photos of toys that I've previously photographed, just because I'm like, well, I look back at the old ones and I think I don't want to share that anymore. But I think, yeah, you're right, Maz, that self-improvement and acknowledging what you've done well, but acknowledging what you've got wrong is hugely important.
Liam, what would you say is what has made the single biggest difference in your improvement in your photos?
Actually, that was Sixo. Yeah, when I first got the DSLR and I was really struggling with it, and he told me, what was the tip you gave me about using one of the modes? And it was like someone had
take the lens cover off. Was that it?
That was the next tip. That was the next one. That one. Plug it in. Charge the battery.
What was it? I can't remember now.
I was struggling because I didn't know where to start with it. I'd got this unwieldy piece of technology that I just couldn't use and couldn't fathom, and every guide I tried to read made no sense to me whatsoever. And you told me something that was just really straightforward, and it was just like everything else just clicked in sequence. And I think you told me to use, was it TV mode at first?
Right. Yeah. I'm a big advocate of it. I mean, I shoot in full manual, which, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know DSLR photography, like a quick and dirty overview is that, there's a kind of balance between shutter speed, aperture, which is the size of the amount of light that you're letting into the camera, and ISO, which and all three of those things sort of control. They work in like a little triangle almost. If you change one, has a knock-on impact to the others. It's all a lot of people will know this. A lot of people may not, and it doesn't matter, but it's fine. But yeah, TV mode is time value, so it's just shooting where you're making a priority of the shutter speed, and then your camera controls the aperture, and that's how the camera works. Is it's kind of in sync. Whereas full manual, you control everything, and I think the way it was always explained to me was that you can start on fully automatic, and fully automatic is the camera chooses everything. So it does the shutter speed, it does the aperture, it does the ISO, it does, I mean, even like the white balance and stuff, all of that can be on auto. But then, you can kind of slowly move through different settings. So, either you do TV and you control the shutter speed, or you do AV and you control the aperture and the amount of light going in. And then the camera does the other half, so you're controlling half of the setting and the camera is doing the other bit. And then eventually, you kind of make it to full manual and you control everything. And I think it's all of that. We don't really have time to kind of explain it all today, I don't think. But all of that, I think, is the biggest stumbling block that people have with DSLR photography.
Yeah, I mean, that made such a massive difference because at that time, it just took off so much of the pressure of trying to understand the camera, because all of a sudden, I didn't have to learn how to use everything, just a couple of things. Everything else was taken care of. And then within a week or two, I then gone to full manual because everything else had made sense. I'd been able to learn the other bits, get the hang of some bits, and then sort of naturally move on from there. And everything then just expanded from there.
I still don't shoot on full manual. I don't shoot on full manual.
Really?
I shoot on AV, aperture priority.
All right.
See, now I couldn't be without all that control. I've gone the other way now. I need everything.
Yeah.
I think I was brave enough to go to this point because there were things that the automatic wasn't doing for me, and I wasn't getting the results I wanted. But with AV, I was getting what I wanted. So I control the aperture, but the rest I leave to the camera, and I'm more than happy with the results. And I think I've sort of convinced myself that to do much better, I would need a much better camera. So I've basically found an excuse for myself not to explore full manual mode. Whenever I have tried to shoot in full manual, I've not been too pleased with the results. So there's still a lot of learning for me to do in that direction.
What sort of f-stop do you typically shoot on, Maz, or is it not like a set thing?
That's not set. So I think normally for so I use a macro lens for most of my photos, and I tend to use something between 5 and 8. I think that the most recent photos I did was 7.1, but then I sometimes switch to the stock lens, which is is it 10 to 55?
Yeah, or 1855 typically. But...
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. And it just shows you how technical I am with this stuff. And that cannot go lower than, I think, 4.5.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So typically, but I can get really close with it, and it doesn't get blurry because obviously with the macro lens, I have to be at quite a distance. So I switched to the stock lens, and I can do really nice headshots up close, and I tend to do those at around 4.0, 4.5.
Nice. Yeah, that's. I was just interested because obviously you've got quite a distinctive style. I did wonder if you were maybe shooting on a slightly higher f number. Do you know what I mean? To try and get the focus and everything, and try and keep it all kind of looking quite crisp.
One thing I've noticed is, and this is obviously a little bit of technical talk, but I cannot shoot with an ISO higher than 100. My photos end up noisy or not particularly clear. I don't have enough light, or maybe the camera lenses don't take in enough light. If I'm shooting indoors in the studio, I always it's a light tent behind me.
In the studio,
it's ridiculous. Yeah,
behind the photos,
right? And I just use ISO 100 because that's the way I don't get too much noise in the photos. But when I go outdoors, like the pictures in the snow or in the wilderness, I just put it on auto. It's auto ISO.
Oh, do you?
In fact, I tend not to mess with stuff. In fact, nearly every photo I take outside of the light tent is it's mostly auto settings. I think it's on P on the Canon. I think that's the setting I use.
Yeah. ISO I tend to try and leave as little as possible because you're right. The more it goes up, the more grain you get ultimately. Because the sensor just kind of lets in more light, and it just it can look really overloaded and grainy. And actually, it's a style of in landscape or whatever. A lot of people maybe shoot with a high ISO specifically to get that grainy quality, or in black and white photography or whatever. But in toy photography, it's just not really what you want. You want kind of sheeny kind of look. And low ISO for me all the way. I try and shoot with 100, but sometimes it just has to be like 200. But I think anything really below sort of 300, you've got a nice quality image for sure.
I can never make 200 work, and anything other than 100. And for some reason, I just cannot get it to work. Just really? No way I'm ever satisfied with the quality of the photograph. It's always grainy or out of focus or something. I don't know. Maybe that's because I'm not on full manual and adjusting other things, but I don't have this global understanding of how all of these settings work in harmony. So I tend to I shoot at ISO 100 always.
It could be your backgrounds as well, because you've got quite like flat color backgrounds. Maybe that shows up the grain a little bit more. I don't know.
It'd be on the figure itself mainly. What I'd notice.
Interesting.
See, I'm the same as you. I only stick to an ISO 100, and every time I try and change it, I can't get it right. So I always stick to 100, and I will mess with every other setting to get the photo I want, rather than touch that again.
It's not a bad way to do it, to be fair. I think keep the ISO as low as possible and mess around with the other stuff, and I think that's a good way to go.
But if we're in a position where there's this one setting that can be increased, and we have no idea how to maximize that, you can imagine how someone who can't even make ISO 100 work would feel about how daunting a digital camera, a DSLR, is as a whole thing. And they're not completely cheap items. Yeah, maybe the entry cost of these has come down over the years, but it's still a conscious investment that
it's still an investment.
It's like I have to justify how much I'm spending on this. And I can understand how it can be disheartening.
Yeah, I think something you said before that I thought was really interesting was, about wanting to get new kit. And I think this is one thing that we've talked about again in the past, that I think I see so many people doing it though, where they're just like, they upgrade to a DSLR and then they're not getting the results they want. They're like, oh, well, I need a new lens, so then they pump in more money into a new lens. And if that doesn't quite get it, they're like, maybe I need a new body. And, or I need new lights and I need new this and that. And it can be a real money pit very quickly. But I think at the risk of sounding preachy, I'm just a great believer that you kind of work with what you've got and get comfortable with it and learn it, and then upgrade when you need it. If that sort of makes sense. I think it's not always going to get you the results that you want to just suddenly upgrade a lens or whatever.
When you said get a new body, I fully expect you to follow that with new minions to command. That's what I heard.
Ian Sweeps pop up in the bottom corner.
Absolutely.
Suddenly Unicron takes over his role in the podcast. As we knew it would.
He's sat over there, actually. He's just in the old corner of the room, just looking rather domineering.
Taking photos with your DSLR.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's a whole other thing in itself. Taking photos of large toys and things like that. Because just something like Unicron, all bets are off. Really, like you can have. I do think size of toys makes a big difference because you can have a sort of method that works for 80% of toys. They're all kind of a similar size or whatever. And particularly when you're using the same setup every day, and you don't really need to change the settings too much. And then suddenly something like Unicron comes along, and you're like, okay, so how does this work? How do we approach this now? And all the trial and error kind of comes back. If anything, you can still use all of the stuff that you've learned, but the first I took a good couple of photos. I say a couple of dozen of photos of Unicron, just literally testing it out just to see what worked and what didn't, just like what is a good way to shoot this. And still, even then, I didn't necessarily get to the result I wanted in my mind's eye, just because it's such a beast.
See, that's why I completely avoid taking photos of large toys now. It's because
they're a hassle.
Because I can't take photos of them. In the way I take photos of my other toys, it just doesn't work because I don't have the space for sort of the Titans. They just take up too much room to do that in the same way, and so my brain just can't up the scale on it almost.
Yeah.
I found with things like the Titans Fort Max and Fans Toys Omega Supreme, with toys like that just didn't fit into my 120 by 120 by 120 light tent, that they had to be taken against card. I would use the background card, but then I couldn't use the diffusion of the light box and the lamps. And all that meant was that the photo setup took loads longer, and I had to spend a lot more time in post trying to sort of patch together a background and make them look presentable. And it would just take so much longer to do those photos.
It really limits and sort of redefines how you frame the shots, though, doesn't it, as well? Because they take up so much room, and you can see the edges and stuff, and it's so much harder.
But then
a lot of room.
Yeah, it made me think about how to make those photos appealing in a different way, because I couldn't make Fans Toys Terminus Giganticus look like I could make a G1 car look in a light tent. I thought, okay, so I've got to do something else with this photo. And it forced me to try new things. And that was a really enjoyable avenue of photography at the time.
I think sometimes the best results come out of those times where you're forced to do something different, isn't it? Right, because you can't just rely on the same old, and you kind of need to mix it up a bit. I was the same as you. Terminus Giganticus, that was a mad one. I remember like having to custom build a new setup, new backdrop and everything.
I remember you doing that. Did you ever put the skyhooks in?
No. I did it in my kitchen actually. I tried doing it. The old skyhooks. I tried doing it outside at one stage to try, just because the size of it, I was like, where is this going to go? Where do I have at the time that was like large enough to kind of fit the thing, and to build a studio style setup, because as you say, light boxes, all of that stuff, it's just not big enough. And in the end, I believe I did it on my kitchen table. I've got a photo of the behind the scenes somewhere, and kind of mounted huge amounts of boxes and rolled a piece of I bought some white backing paper and kind of rolled it down off that, and then got lamps and everything assembled around it. And it was a real mission. And then I had obviously a day to kind of do it, or whatever time it was, because then we were going to be having dinner and everything that evening. So it's kind of like, got to get it all packed up again. And it was a real mission, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember with, do you remember, is it Pandinus, the Scorponok?
Oh, yeah.
When I had to do the gallery for Kapow.
Oh, your Zelda picture.
That was what it was. I got so frustrated, great. I took it out in the garden.
And what a result.
But because it was so big, I thought it just works as like a Zelda temple. So it redefines how you take the pictures and how you normally would. And
I would have hated for the universe to not have that picture. You didn't have to take it outside, because that was
an epic one. Yeah. They were great pictures.
Thank you. But going back with the DSLR, I remember going outside again. It was so hard trying to work out how to, because I was so used to using it indoors, then having to suddenly go outdoors. I just remember just internally screaming loads at the camera.
Yeah, completely different settings. Different settings. And the light just looks so different. And yeah, absolutely.
It's panic that you will not be able to rediscover the settings that worked for you in the first place. Oh no, what if I move this and I can never find that sweet spot again?
Yeah. I think it all comes in time. It's just so much practice and so much getting familiarity with the camera and the settings and all of that. It's just, it's something that when it clicks, it clicks. I think I remember talking to you, Liam, actually, and you saying it's clicked. I've got it now, and I think you do have that moment, don't you, when you just kind of think,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly I get this. It's all like a hazy fog of like these words, these horrendous technical terms, and then just suddenly it comes good, and it's like, oh, okay, actually, this is kind of making sense now.
In the beginning came the beasts, but nature lies. They're robots in disguise.
But it's really easy to stagnate, though, isn't it? You can really easily fall into this rut of not trying anything new. And the dream is to be able to walk into any situation, any atmosphere, any lighting, any environment, and know how to set your camera up for the best possible results for that environment on that day. And I can't do that. That's definitely something I aspire to. But yeah, that's a long way off for me, certainly.
I think that would be difficult only with toy photography if you're doing studio stuff, only because a lot of it is about light and everything. I mean, one thing I would say, if I was being critical of some people's photos, sometimes when I see them struggling online, and I'm never one to be like, hey, this is dishing out unsolicited advice. That's not my gig, or I hope it's not. I try not to make it my way of conducting myself. But I do see people sometimes struggling, and it's because they don't have enough light. And it's literally all that is. All it is they are trying to take pictures of something essentially in the dark, and they're like, they can't get the focus right. They're really struggling to like get something crisp, and it's purely because the camera is having to use a slow shutter to try and get enough light in the lens into the lens, through the lens or whatever, and they're just really struggling with it. And that's one thing that I think you say about being able to walk into any environment. It's difficult because there are just so many. It's not that there are unknowns. You could make it work, but you would have to have a kind of minimum standard of setup, I suppose. And
sometimes that's a tripod. I mean, a tripod is essential. Like you were just saying that the camera compensates by increasing the shutter speed. Oh, sorry, increasing the amount of time it will open the aperture for to let light in. And then the slightest movement during that time will blur your photograph. So you need a solid base. And if you're used to using tripods, then maybe you can find a way of propping the camera against a wall or a surface during that time. And that comes from experience as well. But
buy a clicker button.
Yeah.
I still don't use that.
Oh my
I
God.
still
One of the best things
press
I've
it
ever
with
bought.
I've got a wireless one. My brother hates this because he keeps giving me stuff like this that he doesn't use. And he's like, you've had that for 6 years and you've never used it, have you? I know you haven't used it.
Oh my God, use it. Trust me, it will change everything.
Because I still get photos where I accidentally push the button a little bit too hard and the camera moves at the wrong moment and I blur the photographs. Yeah,
but you don't notice until you get it in the machine. The amount I get back until I look through the viewfinder, it looks fine. Until I put it in the computer and it blows up and you're like, oh, it's all blurred. So a little clicky button, now I just have it on like a 2-second delay. Press that, perfect.
Yeah, it's true. It's amazing how much shake you get even from just a tiny little movement, something that's imperceptible on the camera. I will say video is a nightmare for it. Like the number of times I shoot something, video-wise, get it back, and there's just a little shake or something in the middle of something, and I'm like, oh man, it kills me, absolutely kills me. But yeah, with photography, Liam's right. The little auto shutter things are really, really good and make such a difference. But I still even now, I zoom in when I take pictures. I zoom in on every one on the little camera screen just to see, is it crisp or not. It's a little habit I have every single photo, and I will not move on until I'm convinced I've got it. Just because I cannot abide. One of my least favorite things in photography, toy photography, is taking a load of pictures that I'm super happy with, booting up, checking them out, and they're just a dog lunch. It's just I hate it.
The curse is always the ones where you look at it through the viewfinder, everything looks fine. When you get to the computer, blurry. Everything's sharp, everything's clear, except for the robot's face because it's slightly behind, and it's just slightly blurred, and you're just like, why?
Yeah, that's the face is the one where you, unless you've deliberately decided to take a photo where the tip of the gun is in focus and the robot's face is far removed and there's quite a bit of depth of field going. But yeah, and obviously, with it being really small resolution, that is a really flattering thing. That little preview screen fools you into thinking you've taken a stunning photograph, and then you blow it up.
It's a liar. That's what it is.
Yeah, like group shots, I will zoom in on every robot head. I'm not even joking. Like I'll take a group shot, and actually for me, so much of the trial and error with group shots is making sure all of the heads are in focus. Because too often, unless you purposely decide that you don't want that, do you know what I mean? There are definitely group shots that I take where I'm like, some of them are slightly more in the background or whatever it may be, but you at least want all the foreground lads in focus, right? Like you don't want to have some random bot, mingling in the foreground, which is just randomly out of focus because he's too close and he's fallen out of your depth of field. So you definitely got to have certain characters in focus, head sculpts to make that work, that group shot. But yeah, I'll zoom in on every single one and just kind of double check it and all of that, because I'm just cannot abide getting those photos back and into the camera and into the computer and looking at them and seeing they're blurry.
With big group shots, one of the things I got quite into was compositing. Where you take all of them in focus and then compile the image at the end. And that actually turned out really great once I discovered it was a thing you can do. But again, sometimes it just feels like too much work when you just want to take a quick.
It's a lot of work.
It's like you're like, oh, I'm not waiting for Photoshop to load it, let alone.
That's another skill I aspire to that I've never tried. Compositing.
M.A.S.K, it's literally one button in Photoshop, and it is amazing.
Yeah, Photoshop will do a lot of it for you. I think it is. It's still something I prefer to do in camera if possible. Do you know what I mean? I haven't composited a photo for at least a couple of years.
So what would you do? Like if you set up a group shot, would you just, for example, on the camera I have, I can touch on the touch screen and it will focus on that. So do you just take the same photograph 6 or 7 times if there's 6 or 7 robots, and each time you focus on a different robot's face? And then, of course, you probably use that remote shutter thing to make sure you're not moving the camera at all between shots. And then
by the way, you've got that in there, that remote shutter thing. So that's what it just.
Well, it's a piece of kit that I don't use. That just seems
like you sounded angry at it almost. Like
it's a reminder that I'm getting old and technology is overtaking me. And I'm just
kids with your button.
I was like, I can't keep up with this, man. Can't I just accomplish this some other way without having to learn this very easy piece of tech that I'm now being shamed for not using?
Yeah. Why would I buy a button to press another button?
All right. Ludicrous.
But no, you pretty much hit it on the head there. That's essentially what you do. I think you would struggle with compositing from 5 or 6 images. That would be I don't know how that would turn out. It might work, but yeah, the more you add in, I think once you get past 3, you're asking for trouble, really, of like, is it going to work or not? Because the what you end up with, of course, it depends again on your on your f-stop, what you had for your depth of field. If you've got a larger depth of field and more of your images in focus, it's going to work better. Whereas if you've gone for something like, if you're shooting on something like 2.8, then forget it, because what you're going to end up with is bits of some robots in focus and other bits blurry, and then another guy who's, you'd end up with like 3 or 4 depths of field in one photo almost. It would look really weird. But yeah, essentially you just take the same photo on a tripod multiple times and stitch them together. Well, we were gonna talk about processing and post work and all of that. That was on the agenda to talk about, which I guess we're kind of leaning into a little bit now, almost, of like stuff that we do afterwards. Maz, you mentioned Lightroom earlier, which I think we all use. Liam, is that true for you as well?
It is now, yeah. I didn't used to until a couple of years ago, and it's through you guys' recommendation as well.
Yeah,
there's another way.
There you go.
I picked up that. That's
should get sponsored by him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be using Lightroom if you didn't suggest it. And I think the only reason I used Lightroom was because I had grown so frustrated with using purely Photoshop that I just simply wasn't seeing enough improvement. And this is very typical of me. I have to reach this level of frustration before I'll try something new. It was the same like with my old job. 14 years of not being happy with the job. Finally, I tried something new and I moved abroad to work in something I didn't think was possible. And that was the same with the photography. I just got so frustrated with the lack of quality. I thought, you know what? I'm going to download this program. I don't care. I'm going to buy it. Going to make it work. And it has just been transformative. I couldn't imagine photography without it. No.
The switch to RAW is one of the best things I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the absolute biggest changes. It's one of those things, before you do it, you don't believe it almost. You're like, it might look a little bit better, but I won't notice. And then when you do it and you're editing it, you're like, oh my God. The difference is incredible.
it's just so much easier to tell yourself you're not as good a photographer as somebody else, isn't it? It's just so much easier to tell yourself that story and not try the thing that might work for you.
Definitely.
But that's it. Every little step, it completely redefines how you view yourself as a photographer, doesn't it? And how you do take photos.
Yeah, talking about RAW, it's interesting. When was it? It was not so long ago. I was randomly shooting a load of images and everything, and got them all loaded up and taking a look. And for a good couple of days, I was like really unhappy with the quality of everything I was shooting, and I just couldn't figure out why.
It's all in JPEG.
Yeah, I don't know how. I have absolutely no clue how. I'd switched it back to JPEG on my camera, and I genuinely don't even remember. I mean, I don't even know why I would go in and change that, because everything I do is in RAW. But yeah, and it was all in JPEG, and so of course, even doing a little bit of editing or whatever, just the quality's not there. So, and you see it in the final results. It makes a huge difference, definitely. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting because I know. So we all use Lightroom, but I think it's worth acknowledging that there are other resources out there as well, and that I don't want that to sound like you have to spend loads of money on software or whatever, because you really don't. There are actually free alternatives to Lightroom as well.
I used GIMP for years.
Yeah, GIMP is a popular one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite difficult to get the hang of, but once you do, it does a lot of the stuff Photoshop does for free.
Yeah, definitely. So, what sort of things do you guys do in post typically? How would you describe your post process?
For me, one of the things I love to do is when I import directly into Lightroom, the first thing is to make sure I enable camera lens correction for the lens that I'm using. And that's just like, sometimes you think you're looking at a perfectly composed photo, and then suddenly you realize there was a little bit of a fisheye effect when you hit that correction button. So that's like the first thing I always do. And I love messing with clarity. And once I discovered what this effect did, it was really beautiful. It just adds so much drama in terms of shadows to figures, but it's really easy to overdo it, and suddenly something can go to looking really dark, and the contrast becomes really off, and you're not looking at the true color. But I really love messing with clarity because it adds drama to the photos. And I tend to stay away from things like saturation and vibrance, because that does accentuate certain colors and it makes it look unreal in a way. But if I'm going for a really crazy stylized photo, I will whack that stuff up to max. I play with shadows as well, because my photography just sometimes turns out dark. And I think it's because I always put my monitor to dark to protect my eyes. And I sometimes forget that I'm not producing a photo that's going to look the same on other people's monitors. And of course, that's a big thing. Other people's monitors and devices will portray your photo differently to how you see it on your own equipment. I used to do a lot with temperature, with white balance, but since I think I fixed it in the camera and the way I shoot, I'm much less inclined these days to mess with that in post, because I feel it's something I've sorted during the photography, and I'm happy that it's the true color I'm getting.
Yeah,
and I love to do vignettes, which is something I learned from Sixo. And I was doing the vignettes manually in Photoshop, which was like create an oval, lower the feathering.
Yeah.
But Lightroom, it's one slider in Lightroom.
It's so easy, isn't it?
It's like, oh, that's beautiful, and I love doing that. So,
it does add a little bit of presence to the photo, almost, doesn't it? So
totally, yeah. Even if it's really subtle, as soon as you add it and you think, I don't really notice a difference, just undo it and immediately see, oh, that's what it brought to the photograph. But yeah, clarity, vibrance, shadows, and vignette are definitely things that... Oh, and noise reduction. I do a fair amount of noise reduction, because there is sometimes some graininess, and especially in the surfaces that I use. Like I use a flexible card, and sometimes they can look quite grainy when photographed up close because it's paper. So the noise reduction sometimes removes that, but you've got to be careful not to go too far, because you start to lose the finer sculpted details and greebling on actual toys if you overdo the noise reduction.
I think with all of those Lightroom settings, if you overdo it, then it turns to something not very good, doesn't it? It's kind of it's a real fine art with all of it, because if you overdo it, it's not good. It's interesting to hear how different yours is to what I do. So, Liam, how about you?
Oh no, now I want to know what you do.
Okay. Well, I can go. Yeah.
You're teasing now.
Dangle that carrot.
I try to do as little as possible. My happiest is when I load a photo and I think, I don't even need to touch this. It's just done. Do you know what I mean? And I love that. I'm really pleased with that. I do a little bit of correcting exposure. So sometimes, again, it's one of those where if I just haven't got it quite right, there's a brilliant thing in Lightroom where you can use, I can't remember the name of the function because I've never really looked at the name of it, but you can do a slider from the side. It's not a slider, but it's like a function where you can change the exposure of let's say half the photo or however much you want. You kind of bring in a gradient. That's the word I was looking for, like a gradient from the side, and then you can change let's say the exposure or correct it slightly in one portion of the photo, which I find extremely useful because sometimes the biggest thing is that you can sort out the exposure in camera, but obviously that's for the whole picture, that's for the whole thing, whereas in Lightroom at least you can edit different portions of it. So that's definitely part of what I do. A little bit of correcting shadows sometimes, and just kind of if I think something's got a bit lost, just kind of bringing it up a little bit as well. But again, I do try and keep that minimal because these days is what I try and do is move lights around more than anything if I need to. I've got 3 lights that are set, and I've got 2 that I can move to move shadows. So that it tends to be more what I try and do, if anything, but then it hasn't always worked. So there's just sometimes a bit of correction or whatever needed. Bit of sharpening here and there sometimes. A lot of a little bit of noise removal, as you said, Maz. But sometimes for me, dust is the killer, and getting rid of dust. So that's definitely a thing. Try to just eliminate dust. I've actually, I was going to say invested now, but it was like £3. Finally got myself it's like a little makeup brush to just kind of get rid of dust, because I spent far too long getting annoyed with photos that look dusty after the fact. And actually,
sounds like a great idea. Where did you first hear about that?
It was you that recommended that one, and it's changed my life.
Welcome to the Triple Makeover podcast.
Oh my god! Oh my word! I can't recover from that. That was devastating. Triple makeover. I've completely lost my... No, this makeup brush has changed my life. There you go. Someone can take that and out of context. How
you mocked me in my makeup brush and spirit level. Now look at you.
Well, I don't have a spirit level, mate.
Yes.
I'm not that sad.
But... Do you know, the tripod on my camera actually has a spirit level on it?
Does it?
Yeah. I've never used it, but it's obviously a great thing to have on a tripod.
I don't think I ever take a photo that's straight, so that's not really a consideration for me.
And you used to mock me for my jaunty angles, although maybe you were talking about my physique. I don't know.
That doesn't sound like something I would mock you for.
You did, yeah, because I started taking a few photos at angles, and you said, I like the jaunty angles you've been using.
I was probably being sincere. I do like jaunty angles.
Who can tell with you?
The time. Yes, exactly, yes. But I do like a jaunty angle. I'm a big fan of a jaunty angle. Indeed. And people can take that how they want. But yeah, no.
That's the secret to a good photograph, isn't it? Get a metallic filter and a jaunty angle and you're sorted. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a recipe for success right there. And a makeup brush.
I will say a spirit level on a tripod is high up on my shopping list, because I get so wound up that I can't get the legs on my tripod right, because they're all extended a little bit because of the table I use, and it gets on my nerves no end. Even though it's so slight, I know it's there. I know it's wrong.
Really, I move that tripod all the time. Every shot, I'm adjusting the legs, the angle. It's constantly in motion, that thing. So I don't know if it would bother me too much. I bought
like a little tiny one that you can put on a desk, and it's quite good. It came with like a ball jointed head, but then that ended up being too high. But
yeah. I found a lot of photographs. Sometimes it's the level, isn't it? It's just like the height almost. That you can take a photo from a particular height, and it looks a bit crap, and then you just lower it a little bit or raise it a little bit, and suddenly it's golden. It's really funny.
I was just going to say, it's like what I was saying on Twitter recently, and I don't think people understood what I meant when I was saying the DVD cases have become like my most important photography tool at the minute.
Shoeboxes.
Yeah, it's because with DVD cases and like CD shoeboxes, they're so small and thin and modular, you can just build up and increase the heights of things. It's like you don't see them in the photo, but they
spend so much time looking for a book of the right thickness. sometimes to elevate by just the right amount. Yeah.
Oh my
totally
gosh.
feel that.
So behind my TV, I have a TV. Behind my TV, I have a TV. Sorry, behind my table, I have a TV. And because it has to sit behind on a chair, I went to the charity shop and spent £1 on tons of books, so I could put them on it and then put the TV on top of the books. And my girlfriend's brother finds it hilarious, but I'm like, it lets me raise the things up and down.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
On the topic of this kind of thing and elevation and really big toys, when I was taking some of the cityscape photos I used to do, I had to take some behind the scenes shots because it looked like I'd actually built a cardboard fort for playing in front of the toy setup, because it was like a chair and a second chair and a big box, on both chairs, and on top of the box was like a shoe box and then maybe something else, and then the camera would be on top of that, and I'd be standing on a chair behind it, pointing it down, going, I think I've got the right elevation. And just all the wacky things you do to get the right photo.
And you did have a little play in it afterwards, didn't you?
Yeah.
Still do.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think I've done stuff like that as well, where it's just like books, boxes, whatever. It's just whatever you've got to hand sometimes, isn't it? It's just when you're just taking that photo and you just want it to be right, whatever's there that can kind of like prop something up or get it to the right angle, or and I think the makeshift nature of it is kind of fun, actually. I think
there's a lot of MacGyvering going on sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Photos, yeah.
Oh
There's a lot of like extra random bits of the diorama and stuff, and it's all balanced on stuff in the background that you can't see. And it's just to deflect light off stuff, when you've got light reflections on toys and they're really annoying to get out. Or like I'm taking a photo, I'm holding a comic above the underneath the top light just to try and drown it out a bit. It's kind of late which you go to, isn't it?
That's actually quite a point. What would you say is the greatest length you've gone to achieve a photo? What's the one that really sticks out in your mind as the wackiest adventure you ever went on to get a photo that you had in your mind and wanted to recreate? I'll give you a moment to think about it. I can tell you mine straight away. That's why I'm asking this question. I wanted an excuse to bring this story up. And it was, when I was doing third-party galleries and reviews, loads of people were getting the same sample and I wasn't getting them first. So I had to find a way of making my stuff stand out because it was coming out a week after people in the US or in Asia. And I was like, what's going to make people want to look at this gallery? If I can't just do it against a solid color background. That's just not going to work. So I started to go to ridiculous lengths of trying to create dioramas and strange scenes. And one of the things I tried to do for Galaxy Meteor, the Make Toys Cybertron Starscream, was create like this hangar image. And I'd seen all this artwork of Star Wars hangars where you've got the fighters and there's loads of steam coming off. You can start laughing because you know where this is going.
Oh my god!
Steam coming off the turbines and stuff. Just then,
I was going to bring it up earlier, so I'm glad you brought it up now.
Can you imagine like walking through a hangar with lots of fighters in it, and there's this like bits of steam going off and condensation and stuff. And I wanted to create this steam effect behind Galaxy Meteor. Okay, I'd put it's creasing already. I haven't even got to the good part.
I know where it's going.
So I'd put up like the usual techie background. You got the Prime trailers standing up, and maybe Rodimus's trailer, so it looks greebly and technological and stuff. I thought, how am I going to get steam? How do they do it in photography? So I started to look up how they get steam in food photography, and it turns out one of the most successful ways of doing it is to boil water and boil tampons, and then you take the tampons and you put them right behind the item you want, and it looks like delectable steam that's coming off this freshly cooked pie. So I basically transformed our entire kitchen into this tampon heating facility where the entire dinner table was taken up with this diorama, tons of toys all over the place, and of course I had like the pan going on the cooker. Borrowed some tampons, chucked them in the water, inflated, and then took them out, put them in the photo. I did this so many times, and for some reason, it just wasn't getting any better. And in the end, I think Kit just added steam in Photoshop to it, and it was better than any. Like either the tampons made it too foggy, or it was just this tiny wisp. But yeah,
I remember you sharing a behind-the-scenes photo of your kitchen, just privately, and the utter despair you were in of just having like all these soggy tampons just like all over the shop, and just like, and you were just at your wit's end. You were at your wits' end with it. You were like, I just don't know what to do with
I
this.
think I made it through an entire pack. Like, no, my wife was happy.
I remember we were all trying to be like supportive, but also there was a lot of Mickey taking as well. You can imagine.
Well, it was ridiculous, wasn't it? All for this one photograph, and in the end, it was just done with Photoshop. And the worst part is, when the photograph was done, when I picked the one I wanted, I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the little Diaclone pilots fell over at the back of Galaxy Meeting, just sitting there, lying on his back. I was like, oh, brilliant. After all that, he fell over.
The amazing thing about this is, as soon as you start telling the story, it's not that I think of the photo you took first, it's that I think of that behind-the-scenes photo first.
Yeah, that's almost more legendary.
Pop straight.
Go on then, lads, top that.
Oh man, I can't top that. Mine's really mundane. Like, I don't think I've ever quite gone to those lengths.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something that I've done like that that's really extreme. I don't know. I'm honestly trying.
Have you done anything like very risky? Like, I remember when I took the picture of Optimus Prime and Megatron from the movie where Megatron's about to shoot him in the head. It's like I did that with the masterpiece, and you would think it would just be you position them in a certain way, but I ended up having to balance them on lots of tape cassette and DVD boxes at different heights. But then because my light tent at that time, when I had a light tent, was so low, my tripod couldn't support the camera at that length.
Right, yeah.
So I ended up getting loads of old Amazon boxes and stuff like that and balancing the camera on that. And they weren't supporting it all, but because I had to angle the camera at the same... This is all to get an exact angle. I had to get a mop and prop it against the wall. And then underneath the end of the, the camera lens. And I didn't have the shutter button then.
Oh, mate, so that is risky.
It's wobbling, and it must have fallen off 3 or 4 times. But in the end, I got there, and you can't see the amount of effort that went into taking this one photo that was just copying a frame of a cartoon.
5 likes.
Exactly. There's a lot of that for me of just like balancing stuff on things that is like a bit precarious, and like particularly when it's toys that are worth a bit or whatever, and you just think I really shouldn't be doing this, but here we are. Actually, I think probably in that regard I've had more. I mean, it's similar, but more with video actually. Just trying to do videos of getting some of the sort of big third-party combiners in shot or whatever. There's been a couple of moments there's a DX9 Motormaster, which is like a really long Motormaster. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it's redonkulous. It's I'll have to show you later because you will laugh yourself silly with it. It's funny because it's like someone took Motormaster and then just added like another 2/3 of a Motormaster on the end of it. The trailer is so long. It's like it just keeps going. Yeah, exactly. It's and they've done it because the trailer becomes the combined mode, but it's meant that it's just this ridiculously deproportioned, vehicle mode, and to try and get that in for the video, I think what I wanted to do was a video with a comparison with loads of other cars, and I just couldn't get because it was like slightly from above, just couldn't get the height required. So I got boxes in there and then the tripod balancing on boxes and everything just to get the height and everything. And I think there was a moment where I had to catch the camera because it was kind of like it was all a bit precarious and whatever. But you would watch it and never ever know that was the kind of behind the scenes going on. But yeah, lots of that kind of stuff over the years of just. It's not all professional, is it? It's not like all really polished or whatever. It's a lot of it is Jimmy.
It's the experimenting that's part of the charm, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like I remember when I was doing the pictures of Earthrise Cliff Jumper, and I thought because he's got skis, I thought, oh, I'll get him in some water. This will be easy.
Oh man!
And those photos no longer exist because it was so hard, and so that toy drowned about 15 times because. I got to a point where I got like a Pyrex dish and I got an old blue shirt out of the wardrobe because I thought, this will look like underwater because obviously water's clear. And then he's in there on blue tack and then he just keeps sinking. Probably so. And then it just looked like someone had put a shirt and filled it with water because that's exactly what had happened. But I'd like tape fake grass around it and everything. And I was like, this is going to be like the defining shot of my life. This. And then in the end, I remember the last one I attempted, I put it on like a dinner tray. And I was just like, I've given up at this point. It's like 6 hours of my life I'll never get back. And all those photos, every time I just looked at them, it just looked worse and worse.
Should have just got Kit to Photoshop it. I mean, that's what I did. But actually, speaking of water, I was actually going to bring up the Sixo photo with sea spray, because didn't you do like something really complex with sea spray in the water?
It's similar to what you say about the Pyrex dish. Yes, I did try some with real water. It was good fun actually, but I was pleased with the results. I tried it twice. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I still think I could do better. Given a third shot, it's one I'll probably try to do another time. Although I've got to do something on Fans Toys Sea Spray now, and I was already thinking the other day, could this be one that I get the water out for? And I was like, nah, I'm not there yet. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it was good fun. It was like I had a massive Pyrex dish, and I filled it with rocks from the garden, and filled it with water. And then
I've always meant to ask you, what are those rock-like things you use in photos?
They are rocks. Yes, they are real rocks from the garden. Yes.
The questions you get, honestly.
I know. Yeah, they are real rocks. But yeah, anyway, yeah, filled it with rocks, filled it with water. But as you said, Liam, I had the dilemma of like water being clear when you want it to be kind of cartoony water, and all of that. But yeah, then I think I layered a piece of fake grass into it, and then had to kind of wrap stuff around it, and then put the TV backdrop behind it. And it came out quite well actually in the end. And I think again that was one where I was really determined to get it all in camera. I didn't want to do any Photoshop. I just wanted it to be perfect. And so the little reflection that I got of sea spray in the water was real, and that was important to me. I didn't want it to be a Photoshop reflection or any of that.
I remember when you showed it me, I was so jealous because I was so annoyed at the lengths I'd been to like a few months before with this cliff jumper toy, like memories of all the water that went all over the carpet, all over my room, all over everything part of my house. And just the stress, I was like, and I saw your photo, I was like, I bet he's done this in one shot. I bet it's taken no time at all.
No, it took a long time. It took a long time. And it wasn't one shot. It was many outtakes. And as you said, you have this, particularly I think with those kinds of photos where you've gone to great lengths to get a result, you have it in your mind, don't you, of what it's going to look like. You know what you want it to look like. But the actual, that's an example of where you can picture it, but the getting to that picture is the unknown quantity, how you're going to get there. So you have these ideas like, okay, I'll use a blue shirt and I'll throw that in there. But then the result just is disappointing at times, isn't it? And
it's one of those nailed it memes.
Yeah, a little bit, isn't it? A little bit. But yeah, no, it's the blue shirt. I think is quite a good idea. Actually, did that not work?
No, I thought it was going to be a genius move when it popped in my head. I was like, oh yeah, like the little gif of that guy tapping his head. I was like, there we go.
Now it's just ruined with fake grass taped to it.
Do you still have the shirt?
Yeah, I actually reused it as my Aladdin Halloween costume last year.
Oh well, there you go.
But oh man, it looks so bad at the bottom of that dish. I thought you wouldn't notice it, in the camera.
Yeah, there's a certain amount, isn't there? There's a lot that DSLR photography will kind of forgive and fudge, and there's some things it just won't. It's just
when you want it to hide something, it is not your friend.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it shows up everything, doesn't it?
Now the Decepticons have monster pretenders with rubbery skin.
Beyond anything you've ever seen before. Transformer monster pretenders.
On that then, because obviously, Liam, you've got some pretty impressive kit, dioramas, behind the scenes stuff, all of that. You've got some incredible things. But some of that's been custom made for you, hasn't it?
It has. I got I did have a friend who used to do that sort of stuff, but he doesn't really do it anymore. It's quite sad. But I've had so much great stuff made, and it just makes taking photos so much more fun. Like I say, it's like having a giant playset all of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, just that stuff takes up so much room. I know you and I are both kind of well into our dioramas and things.
Oh, I'm very envious. Very envious.
Get in on it, man. Do it.
Well, I mentioned wanting to get a grassy tunnel for a train the other day, and it just turned into a horrible mocking match, didn't it? Oh, you got your grassy tunnel yet? Man?
I would love to see photos of your grassy tunnel.
I bet you would.
I'm fully, supportive of it.
These go with the tampon pictures.
The worst thing is, I had train sets as a kid, and I had this this tunnel prop that was shaped like the side of a mountain, just like where a train would go into a mountain, and it did have like bits of grass on it and like a stream, and that would just be so ideal for JRX or Raiden photography. And I'm pretty sure I've probably given that away or it's been thrown out, but that something I had as a kid that would have been perfect for today's photography.
Do it, man. Give it a go. Yeah. I would say the one thing, I'm sure Liam will agree, about doing that style of photography is just the space it takes up. It's just absolutely monstrous. I mean, you couldn't do something like that in a light tent, really. Do you know what I mean? You need way more space just to have the kind of diorama set up, really, if anything, to have the space that you need. I mean, I'm looking at my setup now. I've never really measured it, but, you're talking, I would guess, 2 feet wide, something like that. Do you know what I mean? Just to kind of fit it all in.
See, I've got a 6 foot wide table to have it on. That's how much stuff. But
so how do you light that and diffuse the light? Because if you don't have a light tent around it, I find that the lighting is really harsh and it comes out in the photo. So how do you just put those little like swimming caps which diffuse the lamps on top of the lights?
Soft boxes. Soft boxes. Yeah, so portable soft boxes. But I have mine set, as I say, I've got 3 of them, one above, two to the sides, set on armatures so that they're kind of in permanent position almost. Yeah, you can move them if I need to, but then 2 other lights that I can move more freely if I, depending on what I need.
Yeah, mine's pretty much the same as that. And I just have one of them where I have 2 setups, the one at the top and one on the left, and one on the right I can move about. But I've got like a lot of little lights as well, like the different color ones that you can put on the back and stuff.
Yeah,
and little tiny lights. But
I think the move from light tent to soft boxes for me was a great one because it just gives so much more versatility.
It's a freedom, isn't it, to it? And you just suddenly you feel less encumbered by stuff. It's definitely more better.
Do you think I'd still be able to get the results that I get now with a light tent of, just like a frosted silver background or a pastel blue and just put one central figure and that's just the only content in the photograph? Would I still be able to get that effect with soft boxes? Because I tried to do a light tent style photo and line up all of the G1 jets I have, but they didn't fit into the light tent. So I had to take the backing card out of the light tent and I put those the little diffusers on the coil lamps that I have, but it still produced really harsh lighting, but that was the only way I could do it. So you think softboxes would help with that?
Yeah, I think you could definitely do it. I think it would be like any change that you make. It would be a 1 step back to get 2 steps forward. Do you know what I mean? I think it would be a lot of trial and error initially to get almost to the same point that you are, because you would make that change and the light wouldn't be the same. So it would be a bit of a change in that regard. But yeah, I absolutely think you could do it because the soft boxes I have, I'm looking at them now. They're sizable things with great big coil light in the middle of it, the bulb, and then it's essentially the same material that you get for the sides of a light tent, but just stretched over a great big kind of square box, and the light disperses through the room. Actually, they're so bright that you could just turn on one of these soft boxes and it would light the room. Do you know what I mean? That's how bright they are.
Brilliant.
So yeah, honestly, I think you could definitely get that same result. And it just enables you, for me, it was the move to just move them back a bit so that then you allow a lot more space in the middle. You will find, I think, that the light is maybe not as up close. So there's then some settings in the camera, things like that, maybe to change to kind of draw in more light into the camera because it might be a little bit darker just because the lights are further away. But yeah, I think it'll definitely work.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Right, well, we've talked about absolutely tons of stuff so far, and I think it's becoming apparent that we're not going to make this an exhaustively comprehensive episode on toy photography. There's just too much to talk about at the end of the day. Even things like composition and how we kind of set up the kind of practical setups that we do, things like that. Absolutely tons that we could kind of get into. So we are going to kind of move on slightly in topic, but if there are things that you feel like we've not addressed or that you would like us to talk about another time, we could always revisit this topic on another occasion. So please do let us know. But yeah, what I was really interested to hear now was from each of you just how you feel that toy photography has really impacted the rest of the hobby for you. You know, has it made a major change for you in terms of how you approach toy collecting?
Yes, enormously. Whereas originally I might buy toys that I liked, then I would buy toys that I wanted to write about. And if I got involved in a particular niche, I would then collect things for that niche to write about. And I always had this dream of writing a book about a certain area of Diaclone or variant Transformers. And when photography became a thing I took more seriously, and now owning a DSLR and doing toy photos to the degree that, some of you guys, I've done official photographs for packaging in certain special occasions. Photos that were in an official Hasbro book. I think submitted some animated photos for the Almanac, the Allspark Almanac. And then it's now got to the point where I buy toys of a particular condition because I wanted to create a G1 photo resource of what toys look like when stickered correctly, historically. And that leads me down a path of research. And, I just sticked up a G1 sludge the other day, and I needed to look at Diaclone, Transformers, Japanese Transformers, catalogs, all sorts of references to sticker it up the way I believe it should have been originally intended by the designer. And so I buy toys of a certain condition, and I start buying toys of a certain type. And then I think, well, I reckon I could do nice photos of those toys because I don't think nice photos of those toys exist. So I might then collect things to take photos of them. And then obviously, I talked last time about completion. Sometimes I try to complete lines because I have this image in my head of what will the photo look like of all of these toys together, every variant, every release. So yeah, it definitely has an impact on how I collect. And I think without this sort of creative outlet, I wouldn't still be in collecting. There has to be an element of creativity in this hobby for me to sustain my interest, whether it's writing or photography. Has to be there. Otherwise, it is just buying stuff that takes up space after a while.
That's interesting. I can totally appreciate some of that. Liam, what do you think?
Oh, it's completely changed everything for me because it's the whole direction of why I collect stuff and my first thought when I think of Transformers now is taking photos of them. Whereas before it was, buying different toys that I wanted and stuff like that. And it's expanded. Like I've made friends through it and all of this sort of stuff. And it's completely changed everything.
Yeah, I can totally agree with both of you on all of that. I think it's just changes the whole approach to the hobby, really, doesn't it? So
it gives you a completely different enjoyment of it than what you had before because I don't know, it feels more focused in a way.
Do you ever feel like you spend more time with your toys?
100%.
Because of it,
way more.
Yeah,
absolutely,
and like more in depth as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where I'm always grateful for that window of time to spend with each one, really. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't just buy them, look at them and go, oh, that's nice, and then whack them in a cupboard. Even the ones that don't get as much time, later down the line in the spotlight, they've all had that moment of being, in front of the lens and photographed and transformed and whatever. So for me, that's a very important part of it, for sure.
It is like the grown-up version of playing with them, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's like acceptable play. Other than swishing them around the living room, that's acceptable too. But I was just going to say, I think Maz, I recognise some of what you were saying as well in terms of it affects the stuff that you collect as well, because certainly the condition aspect. I know for me, G1 is a great example. That even stuff that looks fine in hand, you get it in front of your camera and suddenly put up the photos and you're like, oh man, that sticker's slightly worn at the side there, or this bit, there's a little, crack in the paint or floor or something. And that's, it brings all those little flaws to life, doesn't it? But it definitely also changes, I think, the kind of completionism aspect of things, because suddenly you want complete lineups for photos. I find sometimes that if I'm honest, that I'm hanging on to toys that I don't really want anymore just for the sake of a potential photo. Does that ring true?
Yeah. Or you buy accessories that will look good in a particular photo. Like I remember the first time I held on to an accessory was I had this little small Mountain Dew keychain of a Mountain Dew bottle. And the first toy I photographed it with was Vinyltech Smokescreen. And I just thought that looks so cool. And as toys were moving into that scale and that level of articulation, suddenly accessories like that had a big impact on how cool a photo would look.
Mm.
And so yeah, buying of accessories, like I've actually held on to MP8 Grimlock because of the accessories, the little drinks tray and all that stuff. It's like,
Well, they came in handy recently, didn't they?
Yes, the Optimus Prime Butler brought to life it. I can't imagine selling that toy now because I'd lose those accessories, and you wouldn't want to sell it without them because the next owner would really want them. So yeah, it's buying things for photos is a thing too. I was just talking about the grassy tunnel, wasn't I?
Yeah, indeed.
But not even just like with Transformers toys. Like I buy toys now for they come with like stuff that I can reuse for, like a scenery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I bought Batman toys or things like that where I don't really care about the Batman. He comes with some wall that like might be useful, or other vintage toys where they've got little features and stuff. I'm like, oh, that would look good in the background here. Doubles as some sort of computer console. Or
I almost bought a Masters of the Universe toy the other day because it had a really cool looking laser. It looked like the thing that Megatron is testing in the pilot of Transformers, where or Starscream shoots it and then it melts because they don't have enough energon or something. That thing that then Megatron gets really angry at him. It looked just like that. I can't remember the name of it, but then I realized how much it goes for, and I thought it's probably a little too much. But yeah, I was considering buying a Masters of the Universe toy because that accessory looked perfect for a Transformers photograph.
I did that once with, you remember Brave Star?
Mm-hmm.
They had like a base you could buy. It's called Fort Kerrium. I was one as a kid, and I never had it because it was obscenely expensive. But it's this massive sort of town, it's battle station thing. But it scales with like Masterpiece Transformers because that's the sort of size the Brave Star figures were.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was so big and unwieldy, it was really hard to ever take photos of. But the only reason I bought it was to use in photos.
Well, I'm going to tell you this now. I was dragging around a whole set of old Masterpiece Seekers for the longest time, just because in my head, the idea of photographing, one photograph as well it would have been, the new Masterpiece Starscream, the MP52 that's coming out, and how great it would be to get a photo of that with MP11 and MP3, and to have them all lined up and everything. And then at some point I just went, this is insane. Why am I'm keeping all these toys? Because then of course you've also got MP Skywarp and Thundercracker in both versions, and at some point I just went, I don't have the space for this, and I don't need it either. Like that, I can do without that one photo. Like my life will be just fine. It will continue without taking that one photo. So I think you do have to rationalize sometimes as well, because it can be a little bit addictive, and you can, I think, just get into this headspace of like, I know I need that photo, I need to take it, and it's not always true.
But it's okay if it is, because it's just another way to enjoy the hobby, isn't it?
That's true as well. I think that was an extreme example from me, just because it was like, you're talking a lot of pricey toys that can be moved on and liquidated for other stuff, of course. But yes, absolutely. I that's not me at all saying, oh, don't do things just for photographs, because it is. I mean, like Liam, I've got diorama bits and bobs as well, and I've actually found shopping for the diorama stuff quite enjoyable, like going on a hunt for like what will work, looking at like fish tank accessories and things like that. And
I've got so much of that.
Yeah, just honestly in garden centers and things like that, like looking at what's there, and just seeing like, oh, that would look cool in the background of a robot photo. I've actually found it immensely enjoyable.
And there's always that frustration of when you think something should exist, but it turns out it doesn't. That's the thing I was fine with diorama stuff. It's like, I really would like this like racetrack in this particular scale. It's like, it doesn't actually exist. No one's made one. Like, why?
a bit like a kind of moon diorama, Liam. That would.
I almost mentioned that earlier, but I thought I didn't want to see your hurt face.
Oh mate, honestly, I'm still so gutted. I have spent, I don't know how many hours, if I totted it up, searching for some equivalent of a moon diorama to use, just like a moon surface, moon rock or whatever to use on the floor. Nada, absolutely nada. And Liam
I was
has
like you once.
the perfect moon diorama. Like I covet it. I can't even tell you.
I think it's time to just commission one. You just need to commission one.
I think it's getting to that stage, which is like a whole other level in itself, isn't it? So, but this is one that is made for him before he stopped making them. So
I'll send you some more pictures of it if you want.
That'll help.
Yeah,
I'll send you some
pictures
of RID toys, mate. How's that?
Boo. But that started with I used to buy. Do you remember the Lego base plates.
Yeah, I had some of
There
those.
there was like the moon one, but eventually they don't look so good in photos. So had one made.
Yeah, good idea. Best way, I think. Best way seems to have worked out. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to get into toy photography, it definitely changes so much of how you do the hobby and how you approach it. I definitely look at toys differently now, and there are, I think, as you sort of indicated, Maz, there are toys that when I see them, I think, wow, that's going to be fun to photograph. Like the Mastermind Creations, the Optus Pexus that they've just released. I'm doing some pictures of that at the moment. I'm not doing it just for your benefit, I swear. I'm not just trying to tempt you with it, I promise.
I see you, Sixo. I see you.
Oh, it is a lovely toy, Liam. You should really get in on that. But that aside, I remember seeing pictures of it and how articulated it is. My first thought genuinely was, I want to photograph that toy. It wasn't even I want to own it or whatever. It's just, I want to photograph it. So, and as it turns out, it's great fun.
Actually, I've just remembered about photography having an impact on what we collect. When we were doing the Great Cybertronian write-off, again, that's hashtag GCWO. Check it out on social media.
Plug.
Plug. We were doing all of 1984 and then all of 1985, and there were some toys that none of us had, and we wanted to have a comprehensive resource. And it was just so fun to do these photographs and then write about these toys, these mini reviews. And I remember actually changing my toy buying priorities to get toys that neither of us had so that I could do the GCW entry. And that's how I ended up with the Power Dashers and Mini Spies, was basically to make sure we could cover those entries. And it was really fun because then it was like, oh, that's going to be my entry. And I can't wait to do the photos in my style and write my mini review of the toy for this project.
Yeah, I rebought toys I already had that I was quite happy with in a better condition, just so the photos looked as good as your twos. So it's kind of changed how I bought toys there as well.
That was definitely a project that kind of inspired a lot of that, for sure. Yeah, there was definitely I think it was just that aim, wasn't it, to get the G1 toys looking as decent as possible.
And it was so much fun, like how, I don't know, it's another way that's kind of what the impact I suppose it's had on me, I suppose all of us, is like just the friendship of it. Like it was just so much fun as chatting about it every day, and like all the different things we were doing for it, and not the one-upsmanship with the pictures, because it was never like that, was it? It was just seeing each person's pictures as they were coming in and going, wow.
They were too different to be like
everybody's
that. They were just
style was their own.
Yeah, like your swoop photograph and then your power glide photograph and just even the Megatron photograph with that really lovely purple background that you used. It was just reminded me of Cadbury's or Silk Cut cigarettes. It was just so, I would look forward to what you guys were doing. And I think it's funny, like the one that stands out for me the most of Sixo's photograph was that Skywarp photograph. So I still remember that. It was one of the most striking photos of that entire run of things that we did. It was like, couldn't believe how good you made that toy look. And it just, it was just on one of your road diorama pieces, I think. Was it road? Was it like an airstrip?
It was road, yeah.
So yeah, that was really fun. I don't think we'd be doing this podcast if it wasn't for that project.
Well, that's where this all came from.
Yeah.
This was where the idea sprung from.
I think what you were saying a second ago, Liam, was absolutely bang right. Is that all of this, actually, the photography, everything, has led to really nice friendships as well, and that for me has been invaluable. And
it all centers around the photography, but that's the things that sort of spring forth from it.
And it's something that we did during an incredibly difficult period of time for everybody. In lockdown, it gave us something to look forward to, and now it's led to this. And this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for photos that we take and that sort of shared interest. So it's led to this, and it's not a big leap to say that us enjoying photography in toys has led to us having basically a meetup every 2 weeks, catching up with each other, enjoying this, and just happen to be recording it and making something of it.
Yeah, definitely. Right, well, it's been a hugely informative and lively discussion on toy photography. I've really enjoyed it. I guess one final question I might have for you both is, who are the Transformers photographers in the community that maybe you admire, the people that when you see their photos in your Instagram feed or whatever, that you think, wow, that's a so and so photo, that looks great. Anyone in particular?
It may seem obvious, but there's a reason why when I thought of the GCWO, I came to you two to do this project with, because I just wanted your photos on that project, and I always look forward to the photos that you guys do for Kit's annual UK-based Transformers calendar. So definitely you two. Also, I really like pictures from Marion Hilditch. She was posting really lovely close-ups with soft focus of toy head sculpts, and I remember during like the IDW phase when I was reading a lot of the comics, her photos really stood out to me. We've mentioned Boastful Manfish, John Strong. His photos are incredible for atmosphere and drama and effects, and just they really capture you. Like, they're amazing, and I really I love photos from artists who can be really clean. They make their images supremely clean, and that started with Ben Munn back in 2002. Did amazingly clean Diaclone photography. Robota-chan in the UK did some really lovely photos with, super clean. That's a style that I've sort of gravitated towards. 20th Century Toy Collector, guy called Mio. You should check out his website. His toy photography is supremely retro and really classy. Really influenced my photos. Tony Bacala on TFW, just some incredible photos.
Just an incredibly polished result with his photos. They really look the business. He's done some. He did some photos of Unicron recently, and I was blown away by how good they are. Genuinely.
Like, sincere apologies to anyone I've missed. Those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, it wasn't really meant to be like an exhaustive list, and I don't think it ever could be, because there are so many talented people. I think for my part, we mentioned earlier, Unicron Nemesis. I think his images are fantastic, really, really good. Always consistently good quality.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really, really good. One for me would be Cybertron Warriors, which
I was going to mention him.
Yeah, he's excellent photographer, I think. Again, really crisp, really polished images. One thing he does that's really nice is he's very good at sharing behind the scenes stuff. And he put out, I was fascinated by it, actually. He put out, I don't know if it was stop motion or how he did it, but like a time lapse thing of him setting up and taking a particular photo. And I have to be honest and say that the level of effort that went in to that was, for me that knows what I'm doing with the camera and everything, it was unprecedented to see how much he'd put into, setting up the shot in terms of the different elements, the different practical elements he used. I guess for me, I kind of forget some of that because a lot of mine stays permanently. Like, my practical setup tends to live. I don't have to dismantle it all the time. So that was that. But also he does a lot of incredible Photoshop work afterwards to really kind of add nice effects and things, which I was quite in awe of.
Yeah, I'd just say all of those, and also Joe Moore from the Toy Art.
Yes, Joe Moore, absolutely,
definitely.
He has so much good stuff as well for like diorama stuff. Like, he makes such great little scenes. They're just incredible.
Also, want to mention Bryce Rutledge, Brycey. I remember his photos were quite influential. I really love those.
His photos for me have been some of the most informative. Just seeing particularly a lot of the Japanese G1 stuff in stunning detail that you just don't see otherwise, pictures of things like Landcross and stuff like that, like the originals, non-reissue versions, and the Six Combiners that just isn't publicized particularly, but he's had some exceptional and very crisp and clean images of those. It's quite something.
They're very helpful when stickering toys as well. His photos.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think his username was also Hyperoptic. Was another TFW photographer who used to take some really good photos. I mean, he did some really nice photos as well.
But there are loads. I mean, you kind of referenced it earlier, but like on the super clear thread,
just
on TFW,
pop in there. Yeah, of course.
Just some exceptional photographers. People like Hard Return as well do amazing stuff.
Bonkers,
Plastic Spark.
Yes, Josh, Plastic Spark.
Great, of course. Gosh, we could go on all day, but there are literally countless amazing photographers, and I think and even just people that doing snaps on their phones and things. It's as I say, it's never really been a better time for it in many ways. It's just incredible to see.
You've got to start somewhere, haven't you? Everyone's got to start somewhere.
I think if you're feeling like you want to give it a go, give it a go. That's it. And don't be. It's kind of what we said at the beginning. Don't be put off by the results, that how you perceive the results anyway of what other people are doing. Because I guarantee you, it's not as glamorous as it looks behind the scenes.
Remembered a couple more that I have to mention as well.
Go on.
Raz's photos are terrific, and for a person to have a collection like he does, and to then photograph it to the quality he does, you just scream out all the time, make a book. Just do it.
We now return to the Transformers.
Okay, so lots of important shout-outs. Also wanted to acknowledge for today some very special feedback that we've been receiving of late. Isn't that right, M.A.S.K?
Yeah, I mean, we capture every positive comment that is made about the podcast on various social media platforms, and we put out those photo collages on Twitter. That's how grateful we are. I want to take the time and capture everyone who's taken the time to listen to the podcast and give that positive feedback. But also wanted to thank the people who had gone to the lengths of leaving a really positive 5-star review on Apple Podcasts as well. So Robinus Prime, Skywarp SCS, Boone Mason, Woodimus Prime, and Captain Alexis. Thank you so much, guys, for leaving such positive, kind reviews on Apple Podcasts. It's greatly appreciated.
And of course, if you do want to do the same, we are on Apple Podcasts or many other avenues. But on Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a nice review if you want to, a little comment.
Do it now.
5 stars. If you've enjoyed what you hear, leave us a 5 stars. And if you haven't, then maybe piss off. I don't know. But no, I'm joking, of course. No, I'm joking. But seriously, just leave us a nice review.
Do it now. Do it right now.
Do it right now. Why wait? Why wait?
What else are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a pandemic.
But seriously, it's been a lot of fun doing this one. And as I said earlier, that it may well be the case, I'm sure it is, that there are topics that we just haven't covered today. I can already think of several. I know the other guys can as well. So if there are things that you would like to hear us come back to and do, like a follow-up episode or something a bit more in-depth, then please just give us a shout, because we're well up for that. I'm sure you may have noticed by now that we kind of like to talk. So I'm sure we'll be all too happy to oblige. Otherwise, it remains for me to say, do look us up on the old social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We are _takeover on all of those, except for Facebook, where we're just triple takeover. So you can check us out there. Maz, where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as @TFsquareone, as one word.
Liam, how about yourself?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those things at Incapable Hulk. Oh no, at Toybox Soapbox. Sorry, I picked up the wrong
flashback.
Whoa. What happened there?
Back in the DeLorean.
Yeah, man.
Gigawatt and went back in time.
Little time jump there. And you can find me as well. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever the other ones are, at Sixo TF. Oh, on YouTube as well. So that's kind of fun. Otherwise, it remains for me to say thank you very, very much for listening, and hope you have a good one. And that's the way the cookie crumbles.